Chapter 331. The three of them were shocked, looked up at the horizon, saw above the clouds, that unprecedented catastrophe had finally reached the final moment. The blazing white light, dazzling, no one could see clearly the figures in that ball of light. They only saw, the dazzling light in the sky lit up the entire firmament, even the rising sun in the horizon finally lost its color. And in the entire horizon, the Zhu Xian sword formation, which was once magnificent, right now only had one main sword left, but that hidden power even surpassed the sky full of sword images. The increasingly blazing white light from Reverend Daoxian's ball of light shot onto the main sword, the entire main sword's color from 7 colors to a single color, from a single white to pure white, radiance 10,000 zhongs, like a wild sword which was about to break the sky. In the violent wind, the beast deity stood above the clouds, watching that celestial sword which should not even appear in the mortal world. A trace of bewilderment appeared on his ferocious face. In the thousands of anticipating gazes, in the thousands of celebratory cheers, the enormous blazing celestial sword slowly moved, turned around and faced the beast deity. In the next moment, the black gas around the beast deity was forced back several zhongs by this naturally hostile white light. Deep in the white light, someone seemed to be panting deeply, the voice hoarse like a ferocious beast growling, a trapped beast roaring. The beast deity stared intently at that celestial sword and that ball of white light, after a long time, suddenly laughed out loud. His voice was already hoarse and unpleasant to listen to. Right now he laughed out loud. It was even more ear-piercing. The listeners all turned to look. The beast deity was seen laughing loudly, his demeanor crazily, as if in his heart there was the most ridiculous thing in the world, but in the end he only laughed wildly, did not say a word more. In the horizon, the violent wind became more and more desolate. Zhu Xian's celestial sword's power also became stronger and stronger, not knowing since when, a voice seemed to be heard from the heaven realm, and hell, quietly chanting a mysterious incantation, started to reverberate between heaven and earth. That ball of scorching white light suddenly rose into the air, landed on that Zhu Xian main sword hilt. Almost at the same time, Zhu Xian's sword formation was already activated, like it was going to break the sky. That wild sword whistled over, looked slow, but in the sky and on the ground, there seemed to be no place to hide. Meet God, kill God, meet immortal, kill immortal. In this world, there was nothing that had this kind of aura. The whirlwind swept away the clouds, all scattered, no one would know, right now facing this Zhu Xian wild sword, what exactly was the beast deity thinking? Just that, he did not have the slightest fear, even more without any intention of retreating, facing the wind, facing the light, the beast deity's enormous body leapt up, actually flew towards the Zhu Xian wild sword. Heaven and earth seemed to be silent. Even the untainted land was holding its breath. People stared at the blue sky with their mouths agape. Black and white streaked across the sky and collided with a loud bang. No one could describe the scene at that time. The sky collapsed, the earth cracked, Mount Qing Yun mountain range shook 3 times in a day. This time it was the most severe. Between the huge mountain peaks and precipices, countless cracks appeared, numerous boulders fell off the mountain, falling down. Within the icy jade pool on the peak of Tongtian, the water was even more turbulent. The originally smooth surface of the pool constantly shot up into the air in pillars of water that were dozens of feet tall. And at Mount Qingyun, the good faction people and the remaining demon beasts were all as quiet as cicadas in winter, especially those demon beasts that looked like beasts but not beasts. Right now they were even more frightened, restless, roaring madly. However, all of these compared to the earth-shattering scene in the sky seemed to be nothing, and no one would care. The enormous Zhu Xian main sword streaked across the horizon, thrusted down. Where it passed, sharp sounds could be heard in the air. Everything along the way were all turned into ashes, not leaving a trace. On the periphery of the wild sword blade, one could see the outer edge of the white light appeared dark red. Not knowing if it was because of the intense friction in the air, or this wild sword itself was too intense. That sword came crashing down, the beast deity howled to the sky, all of his arms clasped together before his chest. His strange eyes opened wide. The moment Zhu Xian Main's sword stabbed down, suddenly the black gas surged, the strange hands stretched and retracted, a shocking thunder rumbled in the horizon. He actually forcibly grabbed this celestial sword that seemed to be able to split the sky. In an instant, the heavens and the earth were all aghast. However, the white light sword, thousands of zhang of brilliance, the enormous Zhu Xian Main sword made rumbling thunder sounds from the dozens of black hands like iron hoop, abruptly, slowly stabbed down. An inch, another inch. The black hands one by one, slowly swallowed by the blazing white light and dissipated. That wild sword right now looked like an unparalleled evil deity, brandishing its fangs and brandishing its claws, taking away people's lives, carrying endless murderous intention. Bit by bit, it stabbed towards the beast deity's chest. The black gas flashed, a shrill howl shot up to the sky, black blood sprayed out. Zhu Xian's sword finally stabbed into the beast deity's chest, and had already stabbed in inch by inch. The blazing white light flickered intensely, like lightning scurrying in the horizon, struck on the beast deity's skin. The skin and flesh quietly faded, the enormous body seemed to become illusory, about to be broken into void by this earth-shattering power. The light in the beast deity's eyes became weaker and weaker. In the end he was no match for this exceptional celestial sword. His body under the Zhu Xian sword became smaller and smaller, but for some reason, as if the power was exhausted, following the beast deity's body gradually becoming smaller, the huge Zhu Xian main sword also started to shrink, only that ball of light was still so bright and dazzling. This situation continued, until the beast deity finally returned to the size of a normal person. The black gas shrouded for a moment, dispersed with a loud bang. The crowd saw clearly. He had changed back to that young man, just that right now his face was pale, his hair disheveled. Evidently his defeat was already decided. And more importantly, almost at the same time the black gas dispersed, Zhu Xian main sword also dispersed, but that ball of light still congealed in front of the beast deity, flickering non-stop, finally gathered between the two of them, transformed into that stone yet not stone, jade yet not jade ancient Zhu Xian sword, stabbed into the beast deity's chest, horizontally pierced out. Reverend Daoxian's figure slowly appeared from the light, just that his face was not the same as before, instead became abruptly ferocious, his eyes even more bloodshot. The beast deity panted heavily, coughed incessantly, his lips slightly trembling, looked down at his chest. The Zhu Xian sword was stabbed into his heart, the blood flowing out from the middle, but it was not red. He laughed bitterly, heaved a long sigh, said, "Amazing, already, can't afford." Suddenly, his voice had just landed, his hands clasped together. Right now his body had reverted to a normal person, his arms were also like a normal person, but with this. He clamped the Zhu Xian sword between his palms. Immediately the black gas surged, straight into the ancient Zhu Xian sword blade. Ka! An almost inaudible sound was heard from the Zhu Xian ancient sword's blade. Reverend Daoxian's countenance changed greatly, quickly looked over. On the ancient sword, a clear crack appeared, horizontally on the Zhu Xian sword. Reverend Daoxian was extremely shocked, with a loud roar, exerted all his strength, pulled out the sword. Almost at the same time, the moment the Zhu Xian sword was pulled out from the beast deity's chest, as if a sharp pain struck his heart, the beast deity also roared loudly, his voice mournful, his entire body leapt up and flew backwards. Reverend Daoxian right now felt the blood in his brain churning like stormy waves. A murderous, vicious energy rolled over and over, as if it wanted to burst out of his chest, but his cultivation was profound. He knew that no matter what he could not let the tiger return to the mountain. Furthermore, he had forcefully opened the heaven's secret seal. The earth-veined spiritual energy was too abundant. It had already overtaxed the Zhu Xian sword. Just now it was struck by that evil beast's dying blow, leaving a crack. Immediately he took a deep breath, and was about to pursue when suddenly he felt a tremendous force coming from the Zhu Xian sword, straight into his brain. In an instant it broke through the meridians and qi acupoints that he had cultivated for hundreds of years. A loud rumble sounded. For a moment, his body trembled, blood flowed out from the 7 apertures of his head. His body swayed twice. With a loud cry, the Zhu Xian sword in his hand loosened. He fell down from the clouds. This soul-stirring scene dazzled the people below. Dumbstruck, suddenly a great change occurred. The beast deity escaped with heavy injuries. Reverend Daoxian instead suddenly fainted. The crowd immediately fell into chaos. For a moment, some went to chase after the beast deity, some rushed over to save Reverend Daoxian, and some young disciples came to their senses from the shock, suddenly discovered that there were still numerous demon beasts on Tongtian Peak staring blankly, immediately attacked over, and how would the demon beasts be willing to surrender? For a moment Tongtian Peak, another commotion. And in this chaos suddenly someone cried out. The voice was urgent and panicked, as if he had seen the most terrifying thing in his life. Zhu Xian. Where is the Zhu Xian sword? Where did the Zhu Xian sword go to? In that instant Tongtian Peak, another huge commotion, numerous people like headless flies, in a mess. Rear mountain boundary. The purple gas column in the illusory moon cave slowly dissipated, leaving only a little propitious gas. The scene in the sky just now was soul-stirring. The 3 of them were all stunned. Right now they then regained their senses. Lin Jingyu breathed deeply, composed himself, spoke to Lu Sueki coldly. Lu Junior sister, what is your intention? Don't tell me you also want to betray the sect? Lu Sueki was stunned, opened her mouth to speak but turned to look at Ghostly, in the end did not say anything. Ghostly looked deeply at her. Both of their gazes met, as if they could see each other's deep heart. Ghostly smiled, turned his head, facing Lin Jingyu, again stood in front of Lu Sueki. Lu Sueki looked at that back figure, her eyes glimmering, complicated and difficult to understand. Lin Jingyu coldly smiled and was about to make a move. And at this moment, suddenly a sharp whistle was heard in the sky, whistling over. The 3 of them were shocked and stepped back, only to see an object falling from the sky. It seemed slow but was actually very fast. With a piu sound it landed on the ground. The originally extremely hard stone slab was like tofu as it was pierced deeply into the ground. This was a long sword. The sword material was strange, like stone yet not stone. The style was simple and unadorned, only on the sword blade with a thin crack, clearly engraved 2 words, Zhu Xian. Chapter 332. Qin Yun Hill, Tongtian Peak. In front of the illusory moon cave, Ghostly, Lu Sueki and Lin Jingyu stood facing each other. The already delicate atmosphere suddenly seemed to stiffen. All of their attention, in an instant, were focused on that ancient sword stuck in the ground. Zhu Xian. The ancient sword whose name shook the world, the legendary sword that involved countless events of the past, the sword that determined the fate of countless people, was quietly inserted into the ground at this moment. It looked ordinary and inconspicuous, as if it had already become one with the mountains and rivers. Just that, the name on the sword blade, was so glaring and insufferably arrogant, although silent but unyielding, sternly staring at the people around, making the people around it unable to breathe smoothly. Not knowing how much time had passed, like waking up from the inconceivable shock, the 3 of them heaved a long sigh at the same time, but almost at the same time, the atmosphere between them had already quietly changed. Lin Jingyu instinctively moved, wanted to go up, but after he looked at the 2 people around him, frowned and slowly steadied his body. Lu Sueki's expression was first stunned and then an extremely bright glint flashed in her eyes. Facing this ancient sword that had supreme position in Qin Yun and even in the world, she also frowned slightly. Following which, she subconsciously glanced at Ghostly beside her. Watching his expression, she quietly distanced herself from Ghostly. Ghostly was silent, as if he was expressionless, but in his eyes, it was as if a flame was burning. That sword, the ancient sword that had appeared in his nightmares for the past 10 years, was impressively right before his eyes. The simple and unadorned sword blade right now in the mountain breeze seemed to be glimmering with a faint light, reflected in his eyes, like piercing into his chest. That was a graceful and powerless green figure that was gently falling from the sky. A furious roar seemed to burst out from his chest, tearing his heart and lungs, charging towards the Zhu Xian ancient sword. Dark green light glimmered, the soul-absorbing stick whistled forward before him, as if feeling its master's emotions. Just that abruptly, a jade-green sword light slashed out from the side. Lin Jingyu, holding the Dragon Slayer sword, had already blocked in front of him. The raging jade-green sword light forcefully blocked the sharp whistling dark-green energy. A muffled sound, the two magical weapons had already clashed in mid-air. Lin Jingyu was about to shout for them to stop. Suddenly, he felt that although he was in broad daylight but with Ghost Li's strange magical weapon around him, suddenly the sky darkened, ghost cries rumbled all around. His body seemed to be bound by thousands of invisible chains, even before his eyes. Uncontrollably there were all kinds of horrible netherworld illusions. And Ghost Li's eyes had unknowingly turned blood red again, his murderous aura surging, his figure even more like a ghost. Lin Jingyu stared and shouted. The jade-green light exploded in the black energy, abruptly leapt up from above. Almost at the same time, Ghost Li's figure had already reached his position. The black energy, with a rumble spread out like demonic wings, swirled and gathered into a ghost hand, submerging Ghost Li's figure. From all directions like raging waves, surged towards that Zhu Xian ancient sword. Lin Jingyu was forced to retreat in midair, unable to block in time. He was anxious and was about to shout in anger when suddenly before the Zhu Xian ancient sword, deep in the black energy, a ray of light as bright as autumn water, like frost and snow blossomed out. The clear sound resounded, reverberating far away in the black energy. It bloomed like a flower, a sword stabbed out. Tianya! That snow-like white light, streaked across the air. Where it passed, the black energy dispersed, straight to the deepest front, blocking the way. Anan appeared before the Zhu Xian ancient sword, her face expressionless. On her beautiful face, her face was pale without a trace of blood. Deep in the black energy, two spots like will-o-wisps stared straight at Anan. Ghostly howl eerily, furious and uncontrollable. As if, ahead, like a wild beast roaring and panting, so unfamiliar? The black energy exploded. From the ground abruptly rose to several zhangs high in the air, and in the black energy, those two ferocious will-o-wisps immediately disappeared. Lu Sueki's mouth twitched slightly, her face still pale and expressionless. Only her eyes flashed incessantly, like thousands of mountains and rivers, passing by in an instant. Thousands of emotions rushed into her heart. Just that, Tianya in her hand still refused to give up. That ancient sword behind her suddenly seemed to turn into a bottomless abyss, making her unable to retreat even an inch. An ancient sword, or a silent and ancient sect that nurtured her. She raised the sword to the sky, quietly stabbed. That sword, light like snow, carried a trace of desolation. The black energy dense, ghostly howls abruptly sounded. In the air, just where Tianya was stabbing, a black figure appeared. Ghostly appeared from the depths of the black energy, but before him, the soul-devouring stick flew up. In an instant, the overwhelming black energy spread down. The entirely black soul-devouring stick shrieked incessantly. The strange blood-red threads at the end of the stick all lit up. A pale hand, stretched out from the air, grabbed hold of the soul-devouring stick, descended from the sky. The wind and smoke immediately raged. Innumerable black energy condensed into a pillar at the front of the soul-devouring stick, struck down from the sky. Towards Anan, and also towards her, that silent ancient sword. Just that, she in the end, still did not retreat. The sword, light like snow, spilled towards the black energy. Before it even touched, the surrounding rocks and dust were already swirled up by a great force, like a storm swirling and dancing. Anan stood in the middle of that vortex, her face gradually blurred. Tianya and soul-devouring stick, the two magical weapons dancing and glittering in the air, seemed to be trembling gently, as if that battle many years ago, again returned before her eyes. Just that time was ultimately short, like emotions passing by in a blink of an eye. A violent rumble, finally still resounded in front of the illusory moon cave above Qingyun. The wind and smoke quietly dispersed, the dust settled, there were still a few small pebbles spinning on the ground, involuntarily gently rolling far away, and finally rolled into the depths of the grass, no longer visible. Anan was still standing at the same spot, her body did not move an inch from her original position. Behind her, the Zhu Xian ancient sword still seemed to be emitting an ancient light, staring at that girl's back figure. For some reason, this exceptional girl, right now her eyes and expression, was that tired, as if that sword just now had exhausted her mental and physical strength. She faintly lowered her head, her eyes indifferent, staring at an unknown place. Not knowing how long, she then slowly raised her head, looked ahead of her. That man who was like a madman, that man who was as silent as steel, that pair of eyes, quietly watching her, there was no murderous intent, no anger, and also no love and gentleness. Lu Sueki's body suddenly trembled, that slight, even she almost thought it was her illusion, but what followed, the pain in her chest that made her almost bend over, like the sharpest steel needle in the world, pierced through her heart. Her pale as snow face suddenly turned red, her body swayed gently, the moment her brows slightly frowned. When she was about to clench her teeth and persevere, she suddenly closed her eyes, bent down. Tianya, a light sound, stabbed into the ground. Anan held onto the sword hilt, spat out a small mouthful of blood, splashed onto the autumn water like sword blade. The blood, gradually congealed into beads, adhered onto Tianya's smooth sword blade, trembled slightly and then, quietly slid down. A wind blew from somewhere, in the empty space before the illusory moon cave, swayed and swept past, carrying a few light whistles in the wind. The black gas dissipated, ghostly indifferently stood there, the soul-absorbing stick glimmering with dark green light, descended from the sky. He stretched out his hand to catch it. Just when Ghostly turned to look at Lu Sueki, Lin Jingyu had already turned and appeared beside Lu Sueki, holding that Zhu Xian ancient sword behind him. Ghostly's eyes coldly looked at Lin Jingyu and then at Anan's face. These two to him were almost the most important people in the world, but in his eyes they were no different from strangers. In this world, a lifetime of time, how many people could a company till old never change? He clenched his teeth, showing his teeth, smiling but proud and aloof, resolute and unyielding, striding forward. That ancient sword was just ahead, even if it was a bottomless abyss, he would still charge towards it. 10 years of time, 10 years of heart-wrenching pain, how could he give it up in one day? Lin Jingyu's face was filled with anger, the dragon slayer sword in his hand glowed again, and at this moment, suddenly Anan stood up straight, although her face looked even paler but her voice was still as clear and moving as before. Stop! Ghostly paused for a moment, then looked deeply at Lu Sueki, sternly said, You move aside. Anan's face looked forlorn, said, You listen to me, go. Never come back. Chapter 333. Lin Jingyu frowned, glanced at Lu Sueki, wanted to speak but stopped. Ghostly heard it but did not seem to appreciate Lu Sueki's intentions, coldly laughed and said, You all let me destroy Zhu Xian, I will leave immediately. Lu Sueki tiredly shook her head, quietly said, I cannot let you do that, the people from the front mountain will be here soon, you can still make it if you leave now. Ghostly and Lin Jingyu were both surprised, concentrated and listened carefully. As expected they could hear faint voices from afar. It seemed like there were still quite a number of people, arguing about something. Actually thinking about it, it was not strange. Zhu Xian ancient sword was a divine weapon in Qing Yun sect, its importance unparalleled. Qing Yun sect could not find it everywhere in the front mountain battlefield, naturally they would search the rear mountain. Not to mention the rear mountain, even if they had to turn the entire Qing Yun Hill upside down, for Zhu Xian ancient sword, most likely Qing Yun sect disciples and grand disciples would also be willing. The noise in the distance gradually became louder and clearer. It was obvious that the crowd was heading here to search. Ghost Li's face gradually turned cold, suddenly snorted. His figure moved, disregarding everything, flew towards Lu Sueki and Lin Jingyu. Lu Sueki's face was pale, but before she could move, Lin Jingyu had already leapt up, the Dragon Slayer sword with a sound like it was tearing silk in the air. The sword glowed brightly, like a swimming dragon baring its fangs and brandishing its claws, pounced towards Ghost Li. Ghost Li's face was cold, his figure like a ghost. His left hand waved, the soul-devouring stick again flew out, completely disregarding the might of the Dragon Slayer sword, directly struck towards Lin Jingyu's head. Lin Jingyu was surprised. This kind of fighting style was unyielding and brave. Instead, it was more like Lin Jingyu's usual style. Unexpectedly, Ghost Li used it on him instead. Just that, facing such fierce attacks, Lin Jingyu's competitive pride deep in his character, bit by bit was stimulated. With a loud shout, he indeed disregarded the soul-absorbing stick. The Dragon Slayer sword's force increased, looked like he was intending to gamble with Ghost Li, to see whose guts was bigger. When the two of them fought, it was a life-and-death battle. Lu Sueki, who was watching from the side, could not help but tremble. When she looked over, there was a trace of worry in her eyes. Just when the two of them were about to perish together, Ghost Li's body suddenly swayed a few times, like black smoke dispersed in all directions, almost like an illusion. Lin Jingyu could not stop his momentum. His sword pierced through the air, and he flew forward. In his heart he knew something was wrong. In a panic he turned his head to look, only to see a black figure like a ghost appeared behind him, flying towards Anan. This kind of strange skill, naturally, was not possessed by Qing Yun sect, Tian-yin Temple Taoism skills. It was also not seen in the evil faction, but after Ghost Li read the 3 volumes of Tian Shu, he slowly comprehended the strange skill from it, and it could not be seen by the common people. Today's test was indeed a great success. Even someone like Lin Jingyu was fooled. Even in Anan's eyes, she could not help but revealed some bewilderment. Just that, for some reason, Ghost Li, who had unleashed Tian Shu's skill, right now his entire body seemed to be completely different from before. It was not like what the common people imagined it to be. Green, gold, red, scarlet. Several energies emerged in turns on his face, indistinctly showing signs of pain, but his body was as swift as the wind, as if his skills had advanced a level. Anan was bewildered but indistinctly understood. Different from Lin Jingyu, that year on top of the divine tree in the great swamp in the west, inside the celestial emperor treasury, she and Ghost Li had seen the mysterious 3rd volume of the heavenly book at the same time. With her level of talent and aptitude, compared to Ghost Li, she had long memorized the heavenly book. Even though the Tian Shu was strange and unfathomable, but between the lines there were profound principles that were not seen in the world. Cultivators were naturally obsessed with it. If one were to say that she did not study it diligently all these years, it would be a lie. Just that this skill, after all, could not be shared with outsiders. She also did not tell others, and what she saw was only Tian Shu 3rd volume. The front and back were broken, especially without the 1st volume of Tian Shu General Principles. It made her even more clueless, obscure, and difficult to understand. These few years, relying on her own talent and intelligence, forced herself to comprehend. More or less it was beneficial to her own cultivation, but it was not obvious. But it was also because of that those Qing Yun sect elders did not discover it, if not Reverend Daoxian, Tian Bui, Shuiwa Master, etc. What kind of people, how would they not notice the strangeness in Anan's cultivation? At this moment, Lu Sueki saw Ghost Li's strange movements, frowned slightly, but after Ghost Li deceived Lin Jingyu, his body again like an invisible object condensed from the black smoke in the air, swiftly transformed back to his original appearance. His speed did not slow down at all, flew straight towards Lu Sueki. Anan clenched her teeth, suddenly retreated 3 steps to the side, gave up the Zhu Xian ancient sword behind her, appeared in front of Ghostly. This action shocked Ghostly and Lin Jingyu, who was far away. The difference was that Ghostly's face revealed a trace of joy. Lin Jingyu instead angrily shouted, "Lu Junior sister, what are you doing?" Lu Sueki turned a deaf ear. A glint flashed past her eyes, as if hesitating for a moment but eventually still with a light shout. Tianya's celestial sword stabbed out against the wind, but where the sword light pointed, it was the opposite direction, 3 chi of empty space in front of the ancient sword. Pooh! A light sound. Tianya's celestial sword seemed to have stabbed empty air, but for some reason, Anan's body shook, and at the tip of the sword, after a moment of silence, blood splashed out, splattering into the air. And that Ghostly, who was swiftly flying towards Zhu Xian, made a shrill cry in the air, again turned into a puff of black smoke, dispersed in all directions. And in this shocking instant, when the blood splattered like flowers, Lu Sueki's face pale and in a daze, a roar was suddenly heard. Ghost Li's black figure suddenly appeared in the air. Tianya's celestial sword stabbed into his shoulder, but he looked as if he did not feel any pain, ferociously pounced over. The sinister orb at the tip of the stick turned red. A wave of blood-devouring evil power covered the sky and earth, enveloping Lu Sueki within it. Anan's countenance turned pale, felt the blood in her body was like boiling water, surging violently, almost about to burst out of her body. Her mind buzzed, the pain unbearable, her legs softened, unable to hold on any longer, sat down. Ghostly made a long cry, his voice mournful. The moment the sinister orb flashed before Anan's beautiful face, he forcefully pulled it back. At the same time his left hand waved, swept Anan out. At the same time Anan flew out. Tianya's celestial sword also followed. The moment the sword was pulled out, Ghost Li's shoulder again like a fountain of blood. And Anan in the air, the sinister orb's evil power was still surging like a tide, surging unceasingly. Her chest was in pain. With a sound, a mouthful of blood spurted out. In the field, Ghostly landed. There was nothing else in his eyes, only that Zhu Xian ancient sword. Right now he was bathed in blood. Half of his body was quickly dyed red, but he seemed to be unaware. His face seemed to have a strange teeth-clenching pain, staring straight at Zhu Xian ancient sword. The simple and unadorned Zhu Xian ancient sword quietly stabbed into the ground before him. The non-stone and non-jade sword blade could not even reflect his face. Only that faint and thin crack looked as if it was new. Ghostly laughed loudly to the sky, like a madman. 10 years of time flashed past in an instant, without a word. His left hand suddenly stretched out to hold the sword hilt. His right hand called back the soul-devouring stick tightly in his hand, fiercely struck towards the Zhu Xian sword blade, towards that thin crack. Lin Jingyu bellowed loudly from behind, pursued with all his might, but it was already too late. Anan had just landed, her mind was still in a mess. Far away, that group of people's clamor suddenly became louder, as if they had discovered something, swiftly rushed over to the illusory moon cave. Just that, in that moment of time, who could do anything? Like, no one in the end, could not hold back a moment of time. That soul-devouring stick glimmering with dark green-black light whistled down from the sky. Its owner right now was bleeding profusely. Following his left hand down, drop by drop landed on Zhu Xian, streaked past that rough-looking sword blade, slowly disappeared, but not a single drop landed on the ground. Indistinctly, in that instant, Ghost Li's heart moved, as if there was some strange and familiar scene stirred his heart, like lightning flashed past his mind. The next moment, he was suddenly enlightened. It was blood. From the corner of his eyes, in that instant, he saw his own blood, flowing onto the Zhu Xian ancient sword blade, especially when it flowed to that crack, slowly disappeared, swiftly and quietly merged into the ancient sword. Zhu Xian, Zhu Xian, Zhu Xian. Zhu Xian was actually like the sinister orb, able to suck the blood of living things. He was stunned and could not control himself, but the soul-devouring stick in his hand had long surpassed the speed of his thoughts. forcefully hit onto the ancient sword. Chapter 334. Zhu Xian Ancient Sword did not move. In that instant, everyone seemed to hold their breath, but the scene was eerily quiet. No sound, no rumbling. Ghostly watched the soul-devouring evil stick smashing down with the force of 1,000 caddies, after hitting the Zhu Xian Ancient Sword, suddenly like falling into a pile of cotton. There was no sound. An angry shout sounded, figures leapt at the end of the forest, Qin Yun sect elders appeared one by one, like the wind and lightning flying over, but only saw that Zhu Xian Ancient Sword was actually in Ghost Li's hand. Immediately everyone's countenance changed greatly. The next moment, more and more Qin Yun sect people gathered. In this chaotic time, no one cared about those original prohibitions. One after another rushed into this Qin Yun sect restricted area. Among them were small Bamboo Valley Wenmin and big Bamboo Valley people. Once they saw Ghostly, their countenances also changed greatly. Wenmin and the rest of the small Bamboo Valley girls saw Lu Sueki lying lifelessly at the side, quickly rushed over and helped her up. As if disturbed by the Qin Yun sect people, something was triggered, that Zhu Xian Ancient Sword, although still in Ghost Li's hand but for some reason, its blade itself, had changed. The original simple and slightly rough, neither stone nor jade sword blade, on that thin crack, because of Ghost Li's ferocious strike, right now looked like it had expanded a few notches. Just that right now from that thin crack, indistinctly a faint red glow, as if the blood that was sucked in, became alive in the depths of the sword blade, started to slowly surge. Like the originally calm sea, waves started to rise, brewing an unparalleled storm, shrouding heaven and earth. Silence, silence. Everyone saw the change in Zhu Xian Ancient Sword, but no one knew what to do. It was quiet in front of the illusory moon cave. Everyone held their breaths and waited, not knowing whose heart was quietly throbbing. Ghostly felt his mouth was parched, subconsciously wanted to let go of Zhu Xian, but the next moment, he discovered, the strength in his body seemed to have disappeared in an instant. A familiar yet distant feeling rose again in his body, and this feeling was what his enemies feared. The blood in Ghost Li's body slowly boiled and surged, actually started to have a tendency to rush out, and the direction it was heading towards was the Zhu Xian Ancient Sword in his hand. Ghostly seemed to understand something, tried his best to let go of Zhu Xian Ancient Sword, but his hands were powerless, and right now Zhu Xian Ancient Sword was like an awakened demon, tightly grabbing onto him, unwilling to let him go. Even the soul-devouring stick in his right hand, right now was also tightly attached to the Zhu Xian Ancient Sword's blade. Zhu Xian Ancient Sword blade, that fine mark, the red light gradually turned from faint to thick. At the same time, like blood flowing through blood vessels, from that fine mark, fine blood color started to spread. From both sides of the fine mark, swiftly flowed towards the two halves of the sword blade. The quaint blade was slowly covered by the blood-red color. Everyone was stunned, including those experienced and knowledgeable elders. Right now, everyone knew something was wrong, but no one knew what exactly was going on, and what should they do. And that Zhu Xian Ancient Sword seemed to completely disregard everyone's worries, continued to carry out its own metamorphosis. The faint blood color finally dyed the entire sword blade red. An originally quaint ancient sword, right now had turned into a strange and mysterious blood-red sword. The sword, light faint red, slowly flowed like a reborn demon's eyes, slowly waking up, watching the surrounding things. The atmosphere seemed to freeze, until that man holding Zhu Xian suddenly exploded with a heart-wrenching howl of pain. Ah! That voice was extremely mournful. Almost everyone was startled, their attention immediately focused on Ghostly. Ghost Li's face was pale, his body trembling incessantly. His face, hands that were not covered by clothes, started to visibly and rapidly shrivel, gradually becoming dry. And at the same time, Zhu Xian Ancient Sword emitted a strange whistling sound. The red light became brighter and brighter. Some sharp-eyed people could already see, from Ghost Li's left hand holding Zhu Xian Ancient Sword, indistinctly red threads were being absorbed into the sword blade. This scene was extremely strange. There was not a bit of Qing Yun Sek's open and above-board good faction demeanor. Everyone present was stunned, but no one made a move. Except for Lu Sweki, that girl who was originally leaning weakly in her senior sister Wenmin's embrace, but right now for some reason, suddenly struggled, seemed to want to pounce towards Ghostly and that Zhu Xian ancient sword. Wenmin was shocked, quickly pulled her back. Lu Sweki struggled for a few times, her body eventually drooped down powerlessly, even though she looked extremely anxious, opened her mouth and wanted to shout something, but she looked around, dejectedly closed her mouth, leaned into the concerned Wenmin's senior sister's embrace, her eyes deep, looked at that man. So, after tossing and turning thousands and thousands of thoughts, heartbroken, she actually watched him in front of her own eyes, die so tragically? Tears streamed down her face. Finally, she could no longer care about the gazes of the people around her. The red light on Zhu Xian ancient sword was already getting stronger and stronger, and on the contrary, Ghost Li's condition was getting worse and worse. Now anyone could tell, under the ancient sword's divine might, this evil demon evil faction, the good faction's mortal enemy, was already at the edge of death. Maybe this was also the celestial sword's spiritual link, casting spells to kill the demon. Many people's hearts quietly thought so, but completely did not want to think whether this thought was reasonable or not. Ghostly naturally would not think, and did not have the time to think about the other's thoughts. Right now, he was struggling before the gates of hell. Zhu Xian ancient sword's sucking power was getting stronger and stronger, even to him. It was already much stronger than when he was young, when he met the sinister orb at the back of Big Bamboo Valley. Just that right now his cultivation was already incomparable to that young man. That was why he had struggled till now. However, he also understood he would not be able to hold on for much longer. Zhu Xian ancient sword's strange sucking power was similar to the sinister orb's evil power, but there were also differences. Compared to the sinister orb, right now the evil sword's Zhu Xian power was even stronger, and different from the sinister orb's sucking blood. At the same time the Zhu Xian ancient sword sucked blood, it also sucked the many years of cultivation in Ghost Li's body. Right now in Ghost Li's eyes, the Zhu Xian ancient sword before him emitted blood-red light, indistinctly like a demon opening its bloody mouth, grinning hideously, about to swallow him up. Just like this ended his life? The moment before he was about to lose consciousness, this thought flashed past his mind. A gush of warm air burst out from his chest. It was pure yang energy, dispersing straight into his meridians. His entire body shook. His mind cleared for a moment, a loud roar, exhausting his lifetime's cultivation, exerting his strength, like thunder and lightning in his mind. Tian Shu 3 volumes flashed past, green, gold, red, 3 energies rose at the same time, although not very bright, but he regained his vitality. Great Brahman wisdom laid across his heart arteries, Buddhism true way defended. Even the Zhu Xian ancient sword also paused for a moment. Taking advantage of this moment to catch his breath, Tai Ji Xian Qing Wei as the path, Ghost Li's right hand instantly doubled in thickness, dark red light sped past, from his arm into the soul-devouring stick. However, just when Ghostly was about to counterattack and escape, Zhu Xian ancient sword's sucking evil power had once again broken through great Brahman wisdom. In that instant Ghost Li's entire body was paralyzed, unable to move again, and that trace of clarity in his mind again dimmed. Right now, to the others, Ghost Li's face was withered, not far from a dead person. Xavian and the rest who had some friendship with him in the past, all turned their heads away, unable to bear to look. And at this moment it seemed that the outcome had been decided. That soul-devouring stick in Ghost Li's hand suddenly lit up, dark green light slowly surged, like slowly waking up from a deep slumber. That sinister orb at the top, lines of evil red bloodlines, again lit up, and deep inside the orb, unprecedented, under the dark green light and bloodlines, a golden Buddhism incantation surfaced. Buddhism, Taoism, evil 3 sects true way, at this moment, in Ghost Li's final strike, merged into one. The sinister orb became brighter and brighter, the strange but gorgeous light flickered incessantly, following which the entire soul-devouring stick lit up, as if it was shouting something. The next moment, from the joint of the soul-devouring stick and Zhu Xian ancient sword, another muffled sound was heard. Everyone then noticed again, other than Ghost Li's left hand, the soul-devouring stick in his right hand was also connected to Zhu Xian, did not drop down. The light on the sinister orb became brighter and brighter, the three colors swayed, a deep, deep voice like an ancient demon god's low moan, slowly emitted. Chapter 335. Wu. Wu. Wu, a stream of red energy, crystal clear, was first sucked out from the sword mark on the Zhu Xian ancient sword, merged into the soul-devouring stick, rolled around in the sinister orb, seemed to still be resisting, but very quickly it could be seen, it was subdued by the strange energy in the sinister orb, slowly turned faint red, a small part assimilated by the soul-devouring stick, most of it through the stick, re-entered into Ghost Li's body. This strange change, once it started, did not stop. Red energy kept sucking from the ancient sword. Following the increasing amount of red energy, the strengthened soul-devouring light grew stronger and stronger, and Ghost Li's complexion slowly recovered. The skin on his face also gradually recovered from its withered state, strangely revealing a faint warmth. The red light on the ancient sword, right now seemed to be helpless against the sinister orb's evil power, slowly dimmed down, while the soul-devouring stick became brighter and brighter. The surrounding Qing Yun sect people were not blind. Right now most of them could see that the situation was not right. Now it was clear that Ghost Li, this evil person, had secretly casted some kind of evil spell. The Zhu Xian ancient sword actually looked like it could not withstand it. After a wave of commotion in the crowd, suddenly a few shouts were heard. At the same time a few magical weapons shot towards Ghost Li. Ghost Li right now was wholeheartedly fighting against the ancient sword. How could he be bothered with the movements around him? Did not have any reaction at all. The next moment, the few magical weapons all hit Ghost Li's back. Ghost Li's body shook greatly. His blood surged, a sweet taste in his throat, another mouthful of blood spurted out, spat onto the ancient sword. The ancient sword had already quietened down. Suddenly with this spurt of blood, a red light flashed. It actually became stronger again. Ghost Li could feel it. He could not be bothered with the heavy injuries on his back. His body instead felt that the extremely strange power of Zhu Xian's evil power suddenly increased again. His heart was like lightning and thunder. He understood that right now it was really a matter of life and death. If Zhu Xian regained its power, most likely he would not have another chance and would end up being sucked dry. Thinking to this point, he let out a wild roar, no longer caring about anything else, using all the strength in his body, his lifetime's worth of cultivation, and the divine ability of the three true methods that he had just comprehended into one. He attacked with all his might. The surrounding people did not see Ghost Li's movements, only saw him receiving several attacks from their magical weapons, blood spurting out from his mouth. Zhu Xian ancient sword's red light wavered. The moment it looked like it was about to light up, a deafening sharp sound suddenly burst out between Ghost Li and Zhu Xian, accompanied by several sounds of bones cracking. Ghost Li's entire body was thrown out by an enormous inexplicable force, like an arrow leaving the bow, streaked over. Everyone's heads fell into the distant forest. The Qing Yun sect people were inexplicably shocked and stood rooted to the ground. After a long while, someone suddenly came to his senses and shouted, "Quickly chase, we must not let that evil person escape." His words reminded everyone, and immediately, countless people chased after Ghost Li. Everyone present could see clearly, Ghost Li was obviously severely injured in the fight with Zhu Xian ancient sword. Right now was the best time to chase after him. The surrounding people all leapt up and chased after him. Only Big Bamboo Valley, Small Bamboo Valley people were dumbstruck. Xavion and the rest did not know if they should give chase, but they could not bear to do so, and when Min and the rest instead exclaimed, Anan had already fainted. When the Small Bamboo Valley girls were scrambling to save Lu Sweki, suddenly, in the hubbub, a tiny voice was heard. Although the sound was soft, but for some reason, it was as sharp as a thin needle, piercing into every Qin Yun sect disciple's heart. That sound was similar to something quietly breaking, coming from beside them, Zhu Xian, ancient sword. Everyone's face suddenly turned pale, as if that soft sound was the echo of the end of the world. They slowly turned their heads, as if this action required all of their strength. Under everyone's attentive gazes, that legendary Zhu Xian ancient sword, quietly inserted into the ground, from the ancient blade that had already widened the fine mark, once again, emitted a fine small cracking sound. The crack slowly grew bigger, slowly but unstoppably extended in all directions, spreading on the ancient and once sacred sword blade, until Zhu Xian ancient sword again made a groan. But that soft crisp sound, half of the sword blade together with the sword hilt, fell to the ground, and the other half of the sword blade was still inserted into the ground. In that instant everyone was stunned. They stopped breathing and their minds were completely blank. Zhu Xian ancient sword. Broken bright heaven and earth, clear sky and bright sun, suddenly a loud thunder in the horizon, rumbled in a blink, but the wind and clouds rolled over from all directions, heaven and earth rapidly changed color, dark clouds hung low, gathered at Qin Yun Hill. A strong gale blew, sand and stones flew, accompanied by the sudden arrival of wind and rain, thunder and lightning roared, heaven and earth roared, violent storm, for a moment poured down. This firmament, heaven and earth, seemed to be crying bitterly. It was night, heaven and earth wept, the celestial sword died prematurely. The cold rainwater hit the face like a knife stinging, the chill was dense, the entire body seemed to be frozen. Ghostly in the forest, could not help but quietly humph. The heavy rain had already been pouring for a full 2 hours, but there was no sign of it weakening, although it was still daytime. But right now the dark clouds hung low in the horizon, enveloping Qin Yun like deep night. One would not be able to see one's 5 fingers. And fortunately, Ghostly was seriously injured. Relying on this sudden violent storm, he was able to temporarily avoid Qin Yun Sek's pursuit. Just that in that strange confrontation with Zhu Xian ancient sword, especially the last strike, Zhu Xian ancient sword's recoil force was unstoppable, forcibly entered his body, broke half of his ribs. Right now the broken bones pierced into his heart and lungs. Even though his cultivation was profound, but he was after all still immortal. Every step he took, the pain made him break out in cold sweat, his mouth making hissing sounds. Right now, Ghostly really wanted to disregard everything, just lie on the ground and fall into a good sleep, just that the last trace of clarity in his mind kept telling him he must leave, with his grudge with Qin Yun sect and his current broken body. Once he was discovered by Qin Yun sect disciples, most likely he would be dead. And to him, there was still a reason why he could not die. So he forced himself to endure, slowly struggled to run forward. The further away from Qin Yun Hill, the safer it would be. The heavy rain poured down, madly pouring into this world, as if to use this heaven's water, to wash away the ugliness of the world. Ghostly panted heavily, every time he breathed. In the dark rainy night, faint white air was emitted. The chill enveloped him, the clamor of the people behind him was getting nearer and nearer, carrying murderous intentions. Very obviously, although Ghostly tried his best to escape forward, but his seriously injured body was far from the speed of the people searching behind him. Just that Qin Yun Hill was deep in the dense forest, the sky was also dark, so temporarily he was not discovered. Just that, Ghostly understood, like this, eventually it was unavoidable. His feet staggered, as if he tripped over a tree branch or something like a vine. His body unsteady, fell forward. In his panic he stretched out his hands to grab. Luckily he grabbed onto a small tree beside him, and with great difficulty steadied his body. But with this torment, under the violent movements, the pain in his chest penetrated deep into his bones, almost unable to breathe, not to mention striding to escape. The voices behind him suddenly neared, as if in this heavy storm, someone had heard the strange sounds, under the command, many footsteps sounds headed towards Ghost Lee's direction to search. Ghost Lee's heart turned cold, but in the end he was unwilling to surrender, just that even if he ran for his life now, he would not be able to escape. He hardened his heart, closed his eyes, his entire body quietly slid onto the muddy ground, face down, buried in the mud. In the darkness, he seemed like a pile of mud abandoned by this stormy world. Footsteps, clamor, slowly gathered over. Many people were cursing and at the same time using the things in their hands to hit the surrounding trees and brambles. A strong wind swept past, not knowing how many people were swarming over. Ghostly in the darkness, sprawled on the ground motionless, his heart seemed to have stopped beating, in the darkness, quietly waiting for the judgment of his fate. Heaven and earth are heartless, maybe all living things are straw dogs. The storm was raging. Chapter 336. The violent storm still did not look like it was going to stop. In the darkness, spots of light swept past. Those were the magical weapons in the hands of the Qing Yun disciples, borrowing the light from the weapons, searching in the storm. This place was already close to the outskirts of Qing Yun Hill's rear mountain. The dense forest was dense, ancient trees were overgrown, the vegetation was extremely dense. In addition, the weather was extremely bad. Lightning flashed and thunder rumbled in the horizon. The thunder rumbled. From time to time there would be a streak of sky-splitting lightning striking down from the horizon, landing in the forest, often splitting a tree. It was really hair-raising. Before the might of heaven and earth, those slightly weaker Qing Yun disciples could not help but palpitate, trembling with fear. And in the darkness, those spots of light looked like trembling fireflies, fluttering incessantly, only illuminating a small area around them. Rumble, in the dark clouds in the horizon, another shocking thunder exploded. The people on the ground felt their ears ringing, could not help but turned pale. Searching for Ghostly until now had passed 4 hours but still did not find any trace of him. Many of them started to mutter in their hearts, could it be that this evil person had escaped? Actually it was not without reason. Ghostly as the evil sect Ghost King sect vice head. His skills were superb. Although he looked like he was injured by the Zhu Xian ancient sword 4 hours ago, but who knew how serious his injuries were? As long as he was not seriously injured to the point of death, most likely Ghostly would have the ability to quietly escape. This thought secretly reverberated in many of the Qing Yun disciples' minds, just that their teachers were urging and scolding them behind their backs. Eventually they did not dare to give up and could only continue the search. Little did they know, not far ahead of them in the darkness, Ghostly was seriously injured, almost dying, unable to escape, holding on to his last strand of hope, crawling in the mud. In the dim darkness, someone suddenly shouted, "Stop, everyone stop!" This person's voice traveled far in the darkness. Even the thunder in the horizon could not drown out his voice. Evidently he was a highly skilled senior. Ghostly lay motionless on the ground, allowing the rain to hit his body. Hearing this voice he felt it was somewhat familiar, but for the moment he could not recall who this person was. But it was clear that the surrounding Qing Yun disciples were extremely convinced and respectful of this person. Almost at the same time his shout was heard. The Qing Yun disciples who heard it immediately stopped in their tracks, stood where they were, no longer speaking. Amidst the wind and rain, the noisy search suddenly quietened down. There was only the faint sound of someone's breathing in the forest. The wind and rain became more and more urgent. Someone seemed to be listening carefully to something. Ghostly felt a chill abruptly seeping into his heart and lungs, his entire body icy cold, a strange creepy feeling. It was as if this strange silence was even more frightening than the loud shouts of the search just now. After a while, a soft voice suddenly said, "Father, what's wrong? Did you hear something?" Ghostly's heart shook. This voice was very familiar to him. It was his once good friend, Xing Shushu. The next moment, he knew who the elder commanding this area was. It was Return of the Wind Valley leader Xing Shuchang, also Xing Shushu's father. And the Qing Yun disciples searching in this area, most likely were also Return of the Wind Valley disciples. Xing Shuchang had been renowned for a long time. He was indeed not an ordinary person. In the ruckus of the wind and rain, he could still hear the strange sound made by Ghostly, just that right now in the dark forest in front of him, he could not even see his fingers if he stretched out his hand. Other than the wind and rain, there was no other news. Even he himself could not help but suspect if he had heard the extremely faint strange sound, or if it was caused by the many people searching together, startled some animals and ran away. After a moment of silence, Xing Shuchang frowned in the darkness, waved his hand and said, "All disciples split up, form a line, the distance must not be more than 3 chi, slowly search ahead, not a single gap can be missed." Ghostly was shocked, such a meticulous search. He almost had no chance to escape. Just when he was shocked, he heard Xing Shu's anxious voice, said, "Father, this forest is so big, you sent the disciples here to search so intensively, won't it mean that other places will not be able to search?" Xing Shuchang indifferently said, "I have my reasons, you don't have to say more, quickly go." Xing Shu was stunned in the darkness, did not dare to speak anymore, turned and moved forward. In the darkness, no one spoke for a moment, but the spots of light could be seen, slowly moving forward in the wind and rain, gradually turning into a long snake, slowly advancing. For some reason, the atmosphere in this part of the forest suddenly became strange. When the hubbub just now, everyone was agitated and instead no one was afraid. Right now this silence, for some reason, made one's hair stand on end. Because of the cultivation-level magical weapons, the magical weapons in the hands of the Qing Yun disciples generally could not shine very far. The brightness was also rather limited, just that they were connected to each other, slowly advancing. Very soon, the distance to where Ghostly was hiding was only 2 zhang away. "Wait!" Suddenly, Xing Shuchang loudly shouted. Several of the Qing Yun Hill Return of the Wind Valley disciples, who were scattered nearby, stopped at the same time. Xing Shu was shocked, walked to his father. With the help of the magical weapon's light, Xing Shuchang's face was filled with solemnity. "What is it, father?" Xing Shuchang's eyes were deep, staring straight ahead into the darkness, but what his eyes were thinking about was not the place where Ghostly was hiding. Instead, he was looking at the distant and serene dense forest ahead. In that deepest darkness there seemed to be nothing, but also seemed to be filled with innumerable demonic figures and ghosts, roaring and dancing wildly in the wind and rain. Something is not right. Under the dim light, the wrinkles on Xing Shuchang's face seemed to suddenly become deeper. His eyes showed some fear, but he was after all not an ordinary person. After many years of cultivation, his will was firm. After a cold snort, he had already made a decision. Zheng, a light whistle, everyone was shocked. Xing Shuchang actually wielded his celestial sword. The sword light appeared silvery white, flickering in and out of the dark wind and rain, bright and dazzling, completely different from the surrounding Qing Yun disciples. But he was silent for a moment, loudly said, "I will walk in front, all of you do not change, still according to what we said just now, form a line to search, but you must follow behind me at a distance of 1 zhang, do not come near." Everyone by now more or less knew something was wrong, but with Xing Shuchang there, everyone had their backbone. Xing Shuchang's face was solemn, holding his sword and walking in front of the group. The surrounding people were still the same, just that they maintained a distance of 1 zhang from Xing Shuchang, did not dare to come near. This strange group just continued to move forward slowly. The strange atmosphere seemed to be in this dense forest in this stormy night, gently panting woo. Woo, like the howling of the wind and rain, and also like the roar of a wild beast, but abruptly, he discovered that it seemed to be his own heartbeat. That heart seemed to be beating faster and faster. Xing Shuchang's old face reflected the light on the celestial sword, became heavier and heavier. Deep in the forest ahead, indistinctly a mysterious hostility, although the feeling was somewhat blurry, as if he could not even be sure if it was the enemy, but the waves of strange palpitation in his heart still made him unable to belittle it. That feeling, he had not felt it for a long time. He still remembered the last time, but it seemed to be 100 years ago. He and Tian Bui and the rest followed Wan Jianyi's senior brother into the wildlands, directly attacked the evil sect's lair? Time passed, so it had been so long in a blink of an eye. But not knowing, the Wan's senior brother who died young, had reincarnated yet. This strange thought suddenly emerged in his mind. Even he himself could not help but felt surprised and amused. He inhaled deeply, pulled himself together. For some reason, today was really different from the past. Rumble! Another shocking thunder suddenly exploded. The might of heaven and earth, for a moment, shook heaven and earth, as if the ground under his feet also shook a few times. Almost at the same time, in the firmament, a bolt of lightning tore the vast sky, broke through the clouds, descended to the mortal world. Like the sharp blade of the heaven, slashing towards the mortal world. Everyone was shocked, the disciples were moved, some could not control themselves. Suddenly one of them was looking up at the firmament, tripped and fell, in his exasperation, almost cursed out. Unexpectedly, when he turned around to look, he was shocked to see that under the illumination of the lightning, in front of him was a muddy body, lying motionless on the ground. Chapter 337. Ah! A mournful voice suddenly rang out, this. Go! A muffled sound, that disciple's voice was suddenly cut off, but in that short moment, it had already alerted everyone. Instantly they all turned and pounced over. A black figure leapt up from the ground, but before he could steady himself, his body had already swayed a few times, almost about to fall. In that instant, several magical weapons had already struck over with the wind and rain. Ghost Li's heart was cold, but in the end he was not willing to wait for death, clenched his teeth and flew forward. Unexpectedly, after a few steps, a sharp pain in his chest, he could not hold on and fell down. And the crowd behind him cheered. A few of the Qing Yun disciples had already caught up, stretched out their hands to grab Ghostly. And at this moment, suddenly, the darkness deep in the dense forest seemed to suddenly expand, like a beast's silent howl. A light flashed past in the darkness. Xing Shuchang's eyes instantly widened, immediately pounced forward, at the same time sternly shouted, "All disciples retreat, quickly!" Before the Qing Yun disciples could react, Xing Shuchang alone had already pounced into the darkness ahead. The celestial sword in Xing Shuchang's hand was dazzling, but after he entered that darkness, his celestial sword light could not be seen anymore. Only angry shouts and howls could be heard incessantly. Just when the Qing Yun disciples did not know what to do, a strange figure shot out from the darkness ahead, headed towards where Ghostly had fallen, at the same time flew over to where the Qing Yun disciples were. With the help of those spots of light, this figure was completely wrapped in black. Only a pair of eyes were revealed, glinting brilliantly. The Qing Yun disciples shouted loudly, drew their swords and charged forward. Unexpectedly, this person's skills were extremely high. He did not seem to wield his magical weapon, but instead grabbed towards the nearest Qing Yun disciple with his bare hands. That Qing Yun disciple, although shocked but did not panic, the celestial sword in his hand slashed down. That black-attired man did not make a sound, as if he did not see it. His grip did not change. In front of the crowd, he caught that celestial sword in his hand. The crowd was shocked. Before they could react, that person used his strength to shake. The Qing Yun disciple who was fighting with him had already flown out, and that celestial sword was actually snatched away by this person. This person's cultivation was high. He was actually extremely powerful. In the darkness ahead, Xing Shuchang shouted angrily again and again, but seemed to be entangled by someone, unable to come and help. In this strange night, there were actually many mysterious masters lying in ambush here. Although the enemy's skills were extremely high, but these Qing Yun disciples were all from famous sects and not ordinary sect disciples. In their shock, none of them ran away. Instead, they all wielded their magical weapons and pounced forward. The black-robed man seemed to be a little anxious and impatient. He increased the force in his hand, and the immortal sword that he snatched suddenly shone brightly, far brighter than when it was in the hands of the young disciple. However, with a flash of brilliance and the whistling of the wind, the sword actually slashed down in midair. A grand halo directly slashed down towards everyone. The Qing Yun disciples all shouted and shouted, all of them retreated to face the enemy. Unexpectedly, although that person's aura was strong, but it was just a bluff, with one move he forced them back a few steps and did not continue the fight, directly carried up Ghostly, who was lying lifelessly on the ground, not knowing if he had fainted or not, and swiftly flew towards the darkness behind. The Qing Yun disciples were shocked and angry, shocked that this mysterious person who came out of nowhere was so highly skilled, angry that Ghostly, who was already in their hands, was snatched away again. Ghostly was Qing Yun's sect's mortal enemy, and because he had always been related to Qing Yun's sect, Qing Yun's sect had long wanted to get rid of this person. Now that he was snatched away halfway, how could they take it lying down? And immediately all chased after him. Halfway through the chase, suddenly a whistle was heard, bright light flashed and shot over from the darkness. In everyone's eyes, the sword seemed to be shooting towards them, and quickly stopped to face the enemy. Only Xing Shushu managed to fly up in time and deflected it with his sword, but felt a great shock in his palm and involuntarily took a step back. But the incoming sword also changed its direction, charged up to the sky, and after a moment it fell down, with a sound stabbed into the mud. It was the celestial sword which was snatched away, still buzzing. And with this delay, that black-attired man had already, like a ghost, carried Ghostly and swiftly disappeared into the darkness ahead. And Xing Shuchang, who was fighting intensely in the darkness, at this moment also suddenly bellowed. Someone groaned in the darkness, blood appeared. Everyone was shocked, not knowing if it was Xing Shuchang who was injured or the enemy. Their teacher's kindness was deep. Right now they did not care much, and all pounced forward. Just that they had only reached halfway, Xing Shuchang's figure had already flashed out from the darkness, landed on the ground and blocked them. Looking at his figure, although he was moving without hindrance, but he staggered a little, at the same time he panted heavily. This short period of intense battle, to him, was extremely exhausting. His panting slightly calmed down and immediately quietly said, "The enemy ahead is highly skilled, and there are quite a number of them. All of you must not be rash." Xing Shushu and the rest of the young disciples felt a chill in their hearts. They never expected to encounter such a situation at this place. Xing Shuchang stared at the darkness ahead, in a deep voice said, "Who are all of you? Why are you interfering in our Qing Yun sex matters? With your skills, you must not be a nobody. Why don't you meet and talk?" The wind howled and the rain poured, lightning flashed and thunder roared, but for some reason, that darkness deep in the dense forest was actually so thick, like an indelible ink. No one answered Xing Shuchang's question, only the sound of the wind and the panting of the Qing Yun disciples. Xing Shushu quietly stepped forward, quietly said, "Father, where are they from?" Xing Shuchang shook his head slightly, suppressed his voice and said, "They are purposely hiding their identities. What they are displaying are not their own skills. We can't tell for the moment." Then he frowned, raised his voice and loudly shouted, "Are all of you still not showing yourselves?" The voice reverberated far in the dense forest, but in the end no one answered. Xing Shuchang's countenance suddenly changed, stomped his feet and said, "Oh no, we have fallen into a trap." Speaking, he pounced forward. The celestial sword glowed brightly. This time it shot straight at the surroundings. There was no longer any shadow shrouding. Evidently those people had all retreated, came like the wind and left after kidnapping. It was obvious they had planned it beforehand and planned it well. Xing Shuchang heaved a long sigh, landed. Xing Shushu, while directing the other disciples to continue searching the surroundings, to see if they could find any clues, quietly asked Xing Shuchang, "Father, what is it?" A trace of disappointment surfaced on Xing Shuchang's face, then he sighed and said, "Although the fight just now was rushed, but I indistinctly felt, these people did not use evil sect skills, and if the evil sect people wanted to save Ghostly, they would not need to hide. But, what kind of people would want to save this evildoer? And there are quite a number of them, their skills are so high." After speaking, his brows frowned tightly, deep in thought. Xing Shu Shu was speechless, turned and looked ahead, only saw the dense forest. Ahead was a stretch of darkness. Where could he see anything? But he did not know. Those people who kidnapped Ghostly, who were they? But no matter what, Xing Shu Shu walked forward, quietly said to himself, at least it was better than landing in Qin Yun Sek's hands. He was thinking like that, in this stormy night, deep in the dense forest. His mind seemed to recall 10 years ago, the first time he met Ghostly at Qin Yun Hill Tong Tian Peak. After a long time, he sighed in the darkness, continued to walk forward. No matter what the future would be, right now he had to continue moving forward. At the other end of the unknown dense forest, deep in the darkness, another strange black figure was watching Xing Shu Chang and the group of people. It was Mr. Ghost. Right now his eyes seemed to be bewildered, looked very bewildered. After pondering deeply, he still could not figure it out. After a long time, he saw the Qin Yun disciples' search area was getting bigger and bigger, but anyone with eyes would know this was already the sign of giving up. Searching like this, in this vast dense forest, how could they find anyone? As expected, after a while, Xing Shu Chang's voice was heard again. Forget it, all of you come back. The Qin Yun disciples were obviously eager to hear those words. One by one walked back. Mr. Ghost watched Xing Shu Chang counting the people, then turned and led the disciples towards Qin Yun Hill, gradually disappearing into this dense forest. He unhurriedly walked out from the darkness. His eyes instead drifted far away, watching the direction that group of mysterious black-attired men had gone, staring deeply. In the storm, there seemed to be a voice quietly saying, "There are actually still people interested in him." Chapter 338. Thunder, lightning, gale, torrential rain seemed to be howling incessantly beside his ears. His mind was in chaos, muddle-headed, seemed to be unable to distinguish who exactly he was. Just that in the intense pain, he felt waves of wind and rain brushing past him, heading towards an unknown place. Someone beside him seemed to be speaking. That voice was unfamiliar, sounded anxious, indistinctly heard. "He seems a little not right, quickly take a look?" An icy cold hand roamed around his body to check. The next moment stunned said, "Why is he so heavily injured?" The person beside angrily said, "Rubbish, he is under that Zhu Xian sword, you think." He did not hear the rest of the words clearly, because at this moment a wave of dizziness hit his head, almost fainted. In his daze, he could only indistinctly feel the sky was still rumbling, the thunder rumbling. The person beside him seemed shocked, quickly checked. That icy cold breath on his hand made him slightly sober. Heard that person anxiously said, "Oh no, his forehead is burning hot. I'm afraid he is having a high fever." So he was having a fever? This was Ghost Lee's last thought, after which, he fainted again, lost consciousness. A rumble woke him up from his unconscious state. His first reaction was that it was still the thunder rumbling in the sky. Just that for some reason, although he was slightly awake but it was still darkness before him, he tried his best to open his eyes to look around, but to his shock, his eyelids were still shut, unable to open his eyes. Following which, an intense pain was felt, but it was not from his heavily injured chest, but from his throat. He subconsciously moved his mouth, hoarsely and softly called out, "Water." There seemed to be no one around, leaving him alone helplessly lying on the ground. The thirst in his throat was getting more and more intense, like a fire burning. His lips moved slightly, without knowing where the strength came from. He moved his body slightly and the consciousness in his mind seemed to be more awake. Suddenly, a voice came from the side. This voice was different from usual, but it was as if he had heard it before. There was a hint of surprise in the tone of the voice. "You're awake. Senior brother, come quickly, he's awake." The surroundings suddenly quietened down. The next moment footsteps swiftly neared, walked to Ghostly. Ghostly struggled to open his eyes again, but for some reason, this time, all his strength was gone. He could only vaguely see two figures crouching beside him, and behind them, there seemed to be a few more black figures. As for their faces, he could not see any of them clearly. "Water," he once again whispered. This time, the people around him understood. Quick, bring the water, quickly. His footsteps were hurried as he ran back and forth. After a short while, someone ran over. Then, a cold hand carefully lifted his head and a bowl-like object was placed next to his lips. The clear water touched his cracked lips. Ghost Lee's face muscles twitched, opened his mouth with great effort and drank the water. The clear water entered his throat, like a sweet spring sprinkled into dry land and dry land. Ghostly heaved a sigh of relief. Immediately a wave of tiredness hit him, and again fell asleep. The people beside were shocked. Immediately someone came over to take his pulse. After a while he heaved a sigh of relief, said, "It's not a big deal. His injuries are too serious and he also has a fever. His physical strength is completely exhausted. Right now his life is not in danger." Once the words were said, the surrounding people seemed to be relieved, and then, someone seemed to look at Ghostly, gently sighed. This sleep, not knowing how much time had passed, Ghostly woke up a few times, but after a moment of consciousness, he immediately fell asleep again. In his impression, he only remembered that there was always someone beside him watching over him. Indistinctly, he saw many people: his parents when he was young, the innocent and beautiful senior sister, the unforgettable Bayao, Lu Sweki, and many, many people, all flashed past before him. Once, he even felt that he saw Tian In Temple Fasyong, Fashion Senior and Junior brothers, sitting beside him, chanting sutras to Buddha for him. At that time he smiled bitterly, but even he himself did not know, this bitter smile of his, whether his face could show it. Maybe, it was after all just a dream. It was as if this upside-down life was like a dream or an illusion. Why chant sutras for me? Chanting, what was the use? In Ghost Lee's moment of consciousness, he quietly thought about it in his mind, and then, he fainted again. Dong! 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 As if a deep bell reverberated in the horizon, unhurriedly traveled over, waking him up from his deep nightmare. That deep bell sound, from far to near, slowly, seemed to strike into his heart. For the first time, he did not have the impulse to open his eyes, and just quietly laid there, not thinking, not caring. Where was he? What world was outside him? In the great thousand worlds, right now only waves of deep bell sounds were left. Dong! 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 The bell sound was melodious, as if it would never stop, and just kept on striking. He listened attentively, breathing calmly. All his attention was immersed in the gentle sound, unwilling to leave. How long had it been? This was the first time he was lying down without any worries. Who knew, the days of carrying so many burdens, what kind of pain it was? Just that, this small world, in the end also could not last for long. A series of footsteps from far to near, walking towards where he was, disrupted his train of thought. That bell sound which was striking in his heart, suddenly seemed to be far away from him, in a moment far away at the horizon. Silence, sighing slowly, he opened his eyes. Buddha! This was the first thing he saw. A huge Buddha word, hanging high on the roof. Surrounding this word, a circle of golden patterns encircled it, and then along the periphery, circles of meticulously carved 500 arhats, forming another big circle. The arhats were all of the same size, but their expressions and figures were all different, arranged in rows, incomparably proper. And then, outside the big circle was a blue-bottom black-edge suspended ceiling, 2 chi higher than the Buddha word circle in the middle. The style of the painting was also different. It was square squares, each square 1 chi square, with golden edges. Inside were drawings of Qilin, phoenix, golden dragon, goat etc. Buddhist auspicious beasts. These drawings were the same in every square. Although he was not an expert in carving and architecture, but with one look, Ghostly knew that this was a work of uncanny craftsmanship. On the roof, in this inner circle surrounding the Buddha word, 2 golden chains hung down, with an everlasting lamp hanging upside down. Looking up from below, it was roughly a 3 chi large copper basin, most likely filled with lamp oil. Ghostly frowned, turned his head and looked around. This place looked very much like a meditation room in a temple. The room was rather spacious, The four corners were big red painted pillars, the floor was paved with green bricks, the door was made of paulownia wood, on each side there was a window, similarly painted in red, looking very solemn. On one side of the wall, a painting of Guanine holding a pure water jade bottle, below it was an incense table, on it were 4 plates of fruits, respectively pears, apples, oranges. In front of the fruits was a copper stove, 3 sticks of thin sandalwood were inserted, wisps of light smoke were rising, drifting in the air. And on the other side of the wall was where Ghostly was. There was a wooden bed, simple and sturdy, without any other decorations. Most likely monks did not care about these kinds of things. The room was also simple, other than the mentioned things, there was only a round table in the middle, surrounded by 4 round stools. The table was all black, on the table were teapots and teacups, plain and simple porcelain. And at this moment, the footsteps had already reached the door, the meditation room's door, with a sound, was pushed open from the outside, a person strided in. Ghostly looked at him, couldn't help but was stunned. It was an unfamiliar young monk, his hand holding a wooden tray, on it was a new teapot. He walked in but did not look at Ghostly, instead walked straight to the table in the room, swapped the teapot on the table with the one on the wooden tray. "Who are you?" Ghostly opened his mouth to ask, but he had only said a word, suddenly felt pain in his throat, although it was not as intense as the last time when he was unconscious, but it was still extremely uncomfortable. His voice immediately turned hoarse. Even so, it gave the little monk a fright. Immediately turned around in his haste. He almost overturned the wooden tray in his hand. "Ah, you are awake?" The little monk seemed rather surprised, but his eyes were filled with joy, smiled and said, "Then wait a moment, I will immediately call Senior Brother and the rest over to see you." Speaking, he was about to run out of the door. Ghostly towards his back, asked in a hoarse voice, "Little master, may I ask where is this place?" The little monk turned his head and smiled, his expression innocent and delicate, smiled and said, "Here? Of course this is Tian-Yin Temple." Tian-Yin Temple. Ghostly was stunned, as if he was struck by lightning. The little monk ran off, most likely to call for the others, leaving Ghostly lying back on the bed, his mind in a mess. Tian-Yin Temple. He was bewildered, but for some reason, there was another sense of bitterness, rising from deep in his heart. Tian-Yin Temple. Tian-Yin Temple. Puji voices were heard indistinctly from afar. At the same time a few footsteps were walking towards the meditation room. Someone seemed to be quietly asking the little monk something. That little monk was obviously young, innocent and lively, laughing incessantly as he answered. For some reason, listening to those questions and answers, Ghostly for a moment was in a daze, not thinking about his current situation, not thinking about the past grudges. At this moment, he suddenly envied this ordinary little monk for no reason. With his innocent and lively look, perhaps he still did not know that there is also bitterness and hatred in the world? Young and ignorant, but in these many years, is it the happiest days for us? The footsteps stopped abruptly, just outside the door. Someone said to the little monk, "You do not need to go in, why don't you go to the backyard and inform Abbot Master that Zhang Xiaofan patron is already awake?" The little monk smiled and said, "All right. But Fazan Shixiang, you have promised to teach me great Brahmin wisdom, you cannot go back on your words." The person outside the door smiled and said, "Little guy, so greedy, quickly go, I have promised you, naturally I will not go back on my words." The little monk was obviously very happy. He chuckled and skipped away. The wooden door opened, in the creaking sound, as if someone paused outside the door, took a deep breath and then walked in. It was indeed Fazan, and behind him, it was still that tall and big monk Fashion. Dressed in white moon monk robe, fair and clean face, holding prayer beads in his hand, Feixiang's appearance seemed to not have changed at all in these 10 years. He slowly walked towards the wooden bed where Ghostly was lying. When he reached the bed, his eyes met with Ghostly's. Both of them did not speak. The atmosphere in the room, for a moment, was a little strange. After a moment, Ephaesiong's lips revealed a trace of smile, placed his palms together and bowed to Ghostly, said, "Zhang patron, you are awake?" Ghostly's eyes twitched, suddenly coldly said, "My surname is not Zhang, I have long forgotten that name." Ephaesiong's expression did not change, only looked at Ghostly. After a while, softly said, "Whatever name you use is naturally up to you, just that, if you don't even want your surname, have you thought about how you are worthy to the parents who gave birth to and raised you?" Ghostly's countenance changed, snorted but did not say anything, turned his head and did not look at him anymore. Ephaesiong also did not blame him, both him and Fashion, when they looked at this evil faction sorcerer who was despised by the world's good faction, their eyes were filled with kindness. Fashion moved 2 chairs from the round table behind him, placed it beside the bed, quietly said, "Senior brother, please take a seat." Ephaesiong nodded, sat down on the chair, looked at Ghostly, said, "How do you feel now?" Ghostly did not need him to ask, in fact he had already secretly checked his body. The ribs that were fractured from the serious injury had been completely reconnected. Right now it was wrapped with thick bandages, obviously to help stabilize it. As for the many external injuries on his shoulders, all of them were also bandaged. Although there was pain coming from the wounds, but indistinctly there was a cooling sensation. Evidently the wounds were covered with excellent medicine to have such an effect. Ephaesiong saw that he did not reply but was not angry, smiled and said, "When you were unconscious, I had already helped you to reconnect your broken bones. The other external injuries are not serious, just that your internal organs are heavily injured and must be carefully recuperated before you can fully recover. Luckily your body is strong. If not even a highly skilled person, with such serious injuries, I'm afraid you will also not be spared." He paused for a while and said, "Just now my little junior brother also told you. This place is Tian Temple. Other than a few people in our temple, no one in the world knows that you are here, so it is very safe. You just have to focus on recuperating here." Ghostly suddenly interrupted his words, looked straight into his eyes and said, "It was you all who saved me?" Ephaesiong's smile froze for a moment, as if hesitating. He turned and looked at Fashion. Fashion lowered his head, softly chanted. Ephaesiong turned back, no longer hesitating, nodded and said, "Yes." Ghostly snorted, said, "Don't tell me you all don't know. If your actions are known by Qingyun's sect, what kind of situation would it be?" Ephaesiong indifferently said, "Of course I know." Ghostly sneered and said, "Since it is so, why did you still go behind your teacher's back to save me, this evil sect sorcerer?" Ephaesiong glanced at him. For some reason, his gaze was somewhat strange. Ghostly frowned and said, "What are you looking at?" Ephaesiong smiled and said, "How do you know? I definitely went behind my teacher's back to save you?" Ghostly was stunned, said, "What?" Ephaesiong leisurely said, "Qingyun's sect at that time, the 7 branches leaders were all extraordinary, each of them had their own extraordinary points. Return of the Wind Valley leader Xing Shuchang was also one of them. That day when I fought with him, to hold him back and not expose our sect's skills in a short period of time, this level of skills, I am sure I am still unable to do it." Ghostly stared at Ephaesiong, stared for a long time. Ephaesiong faced him calmly, his smile unchanging. After a long time, Ghostly suddenly closed his eyes and did not look at Ephaesiong anymore. Ephaesiong nodded and said, "You have yet to recover from your serious injuries, you still need more rest." Ghostly closed his eyes, suddenly said, "Why did you all save me?" Ephaesiong was silent for a moment, indifferently said, "This question, I cannot answer you." Ghostly inhaled deeply, said, "Why?" Ephaesiong quietly chanted a Buddhist mantra, said, "You don't have to be anxious. After a few days, when your injuries are better, naturally someone will tell you." Ghostly opened his eyes, frowned and said, "Who?" Ephaesiong's lips moved, seemed to hesitate again but eventually still said, "There is no harm in telling you, it is my teacher, Tian'in Temple Abbot Puhong Master." Ghostly was stunned for a moment. The next moment, He looked at Yang's face and knew that he would not be able to get any more information, simply let out a long sigh, buried his head and laid down. The melodious bell sounds from afar, once again faintly traveled over. Dong. 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 Chapter 339. Morning bell, evening drum, day after day, as if it would never end. Every day was exactly the same as the day before. Some felt bored, some felt at ease. The years, whether long or short, were in the human heart. In a blink, Ghostly had already stayed in Tian Temple for many days, listening to the morning bell, evening drum, from an unknown place in the temple every day at the same time, quietly passing the days. For some reason, in just a few days, he seemed to have blended into this strange environment. Every day he was silent, only in a daze. He was currently in the prime of his life. His body was in excellent condition, although his injuries were serious. But firstly, his body was young, secondly, his cultivation was high, and in addition, Tian Temple was unexpectedly generous to him. Whatever good medicine they had, they were not stingy and used it all on him. With Tian Temple's reputation, the good medicine in the temple, naturally in the world, it would also be the best medicine. The medicine quickly took effect. His injuries actually recovered extremely quickly. Just that after a few days, he was already able to get off the bed and walk. Just that when he walked, his chest was still in severe pain. After a few steps, he would be panting. But even so, Yang and the rest who came to visit him were overjoyed, exclaiming that they had never seen someone who could recover so quickly. Seemed like in less than a month, he would be completely recovered. Ghostly usually interacted with them indifferently, occasionally conversed. Both parties avoided talking about their opposing identities. It seemed like right now, in the eyes of Yang and Tian Temple monks, Ghostly was just an ordinary person whom they kindly saved, and not the evil sect sorcerer whom they were willing to risk the world's condemnation and forcibly snatched from Qin Yun's sect. And Ghostly also did not ask why did the Tian Temple monks wanted to save him. The days passed by leisurely. Ghostly's body was getting better day by day. These few days, he could already walk more easily. Sometimes when the morning bell and evening drum sounded, he would pull a chair to open the window, sit by the window and listen. It seemed like this Tian Temple bell and drum sounds, to him, had a different kind of charm. In this period of time when he was recuperating, only Yang and Fashion often came to visit him. The other monks almost did not come over, not to mention Puhong Master and the rest of the Pu generation divine monks. Because he was recuperating, Ghostly had never left the room. Other than occasionally opening the window to look outside, what appeared in front of him was only a small courtyard with red walls and green tiles, and a few short trees planted in the courtyard. Just that to Ghostly, this ordinary and simple little courtyard had a long-lost familiar feeling. From the day he opened the window, although he did not show it but in his heart, he immediately fell in love with this place. Listening to the morning bell in the morning and the evening drum in the evening, such a peaceful and leisurely life had only been a short period of time, yet it had already caused him to be unable to part with it, and he was extremely intoxicated. Who knew that in his heart, his greatest wish was nothing more than to live a peaceful life like this, Mt. Meru, Tian Temple, in that vast and majestic temple, in that strange and remote corner of a small courtyard, just like that, living, creak! The wooden door was pushed open. Yang walked in alone, swept a glance around the room, and then landed on Ghostly, who was lying on the bed. Ghostly's eyes were closed, not knowing if he was asleep or not. Yang smiled, turned and closed the door, spoke to Ghostly. "How do you feel today? Does your chest still hurt?" Ghostly's body moved, slowly opened his eyes, glanced at Yang, faintly said, "Every time you come you always ask this question, don't you feel annoyed?" Yang smiled and shook his head. His eyes turned and walked to the other side of the wall, in front of the Guanyin statue. He picked up 3 sticks of sandalwood incense from the offering table, lit a thin candle by the side and then inserted it into the copper incense burner. Light smoke rose in spirals, drifted into the air. that guanine statue suddenly became somewhat misty. The air also started to be filled with the smell of sandalwood. Ephaesiong put his palms together, kowtowed 3 times to the guanine statue and then turned around, looked at Ghostly for a long while, suddenly said, "Aren't you coming over to pay your respects?" Ghostly was surprised, involuntarily looked towards that portrait. The guanine statue in the portrait had a benevolent face, dignified and beautiful, a pair of intelligent eyes slender and long looking ahead, as if looking at all the mortals in the world. Right now, she seemed to be benevolently looking at himself. His heart was moved, but then he sneered and said, "Why should I pay my respects to her, if she really has a spirit? I don't know how many times I have prayed to heaven and the various deities and Buddhas, but I have never seen them show any mercy." Ephaesiong looked at him for a long time. Ghostly looked back calmly, a cold smile still hanging on his lips, not showing any signs of remorse. After a long while, Ephaesiong heaved a long sigh, turned around and bowed his head to the guanine statue. His mouth softly muttered something, not knowing what he was saying. Ghostly watched him from behind, sneered incessantly. After paying his respects, Ephaesiong turned around. The benevolent look on his face gradually faded, changed into a peaceful smile, said, "I see that you look good today and your body has more or less recovered. Why don't we go out?" Ghostly was surprised, said, "Go out, where to?" Ephaesiong smiled and said, "Go to the place you want to go, see the person you want to see." Ghostly frowned and then raised his brows, said, "Why, don't tell me it is Puhong Master he." Ephaesiong nodded and said, "Exactly, teacher heard that you have recovered and was very happy. Let me come over today to take a look. If you are not tired, we can meet. What do you think?" Ghostly stared at Ephaesiong for a long time, suddenly smiled and said, "Good, good, good. I have waited for this day for a long time. Naturally I want to see him, not to mention my body recovered, even if I was seriously injured that day, as long as he is willing, even if I have to crawl to see him." Ephaesiong put his palms together, said, "Patron is too serious, please follow me." After speaking, he led the way, walked to the door first, opened it and walked out. Ghostly followed behind, but when he was about to walk out of the room, for some reason, he suddenly turned back and looked at that guanine statue on the wall. In the light smoke curling up, Guanine's benevolent countenance, with a slight smile, seemed to be staring at him. Ghostly frowned, snorted and immediately turned around, without looking back, walked straight away, leaving only the sandalwood fragrance, gently drifting in the empty room behind him. Walking out of the courtyard, it was a tunnel about 2 zhang long, 4 chi wide. Both sides were red walls, about 2 people's height. The roof was also covered with green glazed tiles. At the end of the tunnel was a circular arched door. When he neared that arched door, indistinctly a sound was heard from outside. That sound was rather strange. At first it seemed to be the sound of monks chanting scriptures in the temple, but among it, there were other strange sounds mixed in, some which Ghostly imagined should not appear here, like the village women gathered together chatting, or the devotees loudly praying to Buddha. Indistinctly there were sounds of children crying. These kinds of strange sounds, how could it appear in Tian-yin Temple, one of the 3 great sects of the world's good faction? Ghostly was bewildered, looked at Ephaesiong, but Ephaesiong's expression did not change, leading the way in front of him, walked out of the arched door. Ghostly frowned, composed himself and also walked out. Outside the door, it suddenly became wide and spacious, white jade as the stone, flat ground as the field, stone steps stacked up, 9 in one group, connecting to the great strength hall. There were actually 9 by 9 81 groups. And between the jade railings, the hall stood majestically, extremely tall. In front of the hall 13 enormous stone pillars shot up to the sky, more than 10 zhang tall. The golden walls of the hall splendid, 8 roof ridges divided equally, carved in the shape of a dragon's head. In front of each roof ridge cornice, 10 auspicious beasts were carved, different shapes, vivid and lifelike. Note 1. And the hall's various carvings were gorgeous and exquisite, far beyond the common people's imagination, not something an ordinary person could make. Behind the great strength hall, there were towering halls on both sides and in front. Some of them were connected to the plaza, some were connected by winding paths, and some were directly connected to each other. Layer upon layer, it was a magnificent sight. Just that although the buildings were magnificent, and indeed made one exclaim in admiration, but at this moment, what made Ghostly most shocked was not these, but on this Buddhism's solemn sacred place. Right now there were innumerable mortals shuttling back and forth, holding incense sticks in their hands, kneeling and praying to Buddha. The steps and public square, inside and outside the hall, the incense sticks were unimaginably flourishing. Such a huge Tian-in temple, which held a high position in the world's good faction, was like an ordinary mortal temple, open to innumerable mortals to burn incense and pray to Buddha. Ghostly had never thought of this. The strange sounds just now he understood, but everything in front of him, he was even more confused. Growing up on Qin-Yun Hill, he was long used to the so-called celestial demeanor, celestial mountain, celestial realm. It was something only cultivators could have. On Qin-Yun Hill, when had he ever seen an ordinary commoner coming up to burn incense and pray? Chapter 340. He turned to look at Feixiang, asked in astonishment. This, Feixiang smiled and said, "Today is the first day of the lunar month, so there are more people. Although our temple is full of incense, but usually there are not so many people, just that every 1st and 15th day of the lunar month, the commoners within a radius of several hundred miles have the custom of coming over to worship Buddha." Ghostly shook his head, hesitated for a moment, eventually still asked, "No, I just find it strange. Why would you let the commoners come in to burn incense and worship Buddha?" Feixiang seemed to have expected Ghostly to ask this question, nodded his head, made a this-way gesture and then led Ghostly towards the back of the Great Strength Hall. While walking he said, "Actually previously, Tian-in Temple was the same as Qin-Yun's sect and the other influential families, not open to the secular world, just that after my teacher Puhong Master took over as abbot, with the other 3 teacher uncles comprehended Buddhism, made a great wish, said, 'Buddha is the Buddha of all living beings, not just me alone.' So we decided to open the mountain gates to accept the commoners." Speaking till here, Feixiang stopped, turned and pointed to the numerous steps leading to the Great Strength Hall, said, "Do you see that long stone steps?" Ghostly nodded, said, "Why?" Feixiang placed his palms together and said, "That was when a teacher uncle saw that the mountain path was steep, although the commoners had the heart to worship Buddha, but many of them were physically weak and unable to move, unable to go up the mountain to fulfill their wishes, so he used his great powers, with one person's strength, spent 10 years of effort, on the originally steep mountain path, forcefully opened up this Buddha path, did such a meritorious deed." Ghostly couldn't help but feel deep veneration. His face also turned solemn, said, "There is actually such an incredible senior. May I ask his name?" Feixiang glanced at him, unexpectedly after a moment of silence, quietly said, "That teacher uncle's name is Puji, has already passed away for more than 10 years. Ghostly's body abruptly stiffened, like Puji. These 2 words, like a sudden clap of thunder on a clear day, struck in his mind, directly shaking his mind. Feixiang looked at Ghostly's fluctuating expression, suddenly sorrowful, suddenly resentful, heaved a long sigh, quietly said, "Forget it, let's go, Abbot is still waiting for us." Ghostly woodenly followed Feixiang over, just that his originally relaxed steps, right now had become extremely heavy. After walking a few feet, he suddenly looked back with a complicated expression. In the distance there was a bustling crowd. Countless people were walking on the stone step. Old people, men, women, children, all of them had pious expressions on their faces as they walked on the stone steps, chanting the name of Buddha. It was as if walking on this path would bring them closer to Buddha. Ghostly's expression was complicated. His hands clenched into fists and then slowly released. After a long time, eventually he slowly turned his head and walked forward. Feixiang, who was waiting in front of them, put his palms together and chanted. He did not say anything. The 2 of them left together, leaving the countless believers and the silent Buddhist path behind, leaving them in the human world. This place used to be the human world. It was no longer the land of immortals and Buddhas. After walking past the Great Strength Hall, there was still a long string of halls and temples behind. Tian'an Temple was after all a famous large sect. Its grandeur was not something a normal temple could compare to. Just that Fa Xiang led Ghostly all the way to the back, did not stop at any of the halls and pavilions, only walked towards the back of the mountain. Ghostly followed behind Fa Xiang all the way, did not speak a word. His face was filled with thoughts. He turned a blind eye to those magnificent and exquisite buildings around him. Just that in the end, Fa Xiang led him out of Tian'an Temple's back door, onto a small mountain path towards Mount Meru Peak. Ghostly frowned and said, "Why, Puhong Master, he is not in the temple?" Fa Xiang nodded his head, said, "That's right, although our temple is open to the secular world, it is an act of boundless merit, but as a monk after all needs peace and quiet. Teacher and the few teacher uncles are people who like peace and quiet and have always stayed in the small temple at the top of the mountain. We usually call it Little Tian'an Temple." After speaking, he smiled, revealing 2 rows of white teeth. Ghostly silently nodded, did not speak, followed Fa Xiang towards Mount Meru Peak. Although Mount Meru Peak could not be compared to Qing Yun Sect Tong Tian Peak, which towered into the clouds, but it was definitely not low. The Tian'an Temple that they came out from was already halfway up the mountain, but this time they headed up. It took them an entire hour before they saw Little Tian'an Temple's signboard. Looking from the outside, Little Tian'an Temple was indeed called a small one. It was only 3 entrances in and out of the courtyard, a far cry from that majestic Tian'an Temple halfway up the mountain, but this place was far from the secular world. The surroundings were filled with green pines and tall bamboos, densely packed into a forest. The mountain breeze blew past, the loose bamboos swayed, an indescribable tranquility and elegance, compared to the bustle at the foot of the mountain. It was another kind of feeling. Ghostly had just recovered from his serious injuries. After walking for such a long distance, his forehead was already sweating. He stopped to rest for the moment, turned back and looked. The incense in Tian'an Temple halfway up the mountain was flourishing, threads of incense wafting up. Even at such a distance, he could see it clearly, indistinctly human voices, an indescribable pious solemnity. Ghostly stared for a long time, lost in thought, not knowing what he was thinking. After a long time he turned around. Fa Xiang nodded, brought him into Little Tian'an Temple. This place was much simpler than the foot of the mountain. Both of them passed through the temple hall in the middle, turned right twice, walked into the rear hall. There were 3 quiet meditation rooms. Fa Xiang walked forward, headed to the door of the meditation room in the middle, loudly said, "Master, Zhang Xiaofan patron has arrived." An old but amiable voice immediately sounded in the meditation room, said, "Please come in." Fa Xiang turned back, made an inviting gesture to Ghostly. Ghostly hesitated for a moment, then walked into that room. Fa Xiang instead stopped outside, seemed like he did not have the intention to go in. Entering the meditation room, Ghostly looked around. This meditation room was simple and unadorned. All the furnishings were almost exactly the same as the meditation room where he was recuperating at the foot of the mountain. And the current world's good faction giant, Tian'an Temple Abbot Puhong Master, was sitting cross-legged on the meditation bed, his hand holding a string of prayer beads, looking at him with a smile. "You are here." Puhong Master's voice was calm. He smiled and said, for some reason, facing this holy monk, Ghostly's originally restless heart very quickly calmed down, took a deep breath. He nodded and said, "Yes." Puhong Master carefully assessed him, from top to bottom. His eyes glimmered with a strange kind of benevolence and light. The prayer beads in his hand also gently turned, after a long time said, "You should have something to ask me, right?" Ghostly immediately nodded, said, "That's right, I am very curious. Why did Tian'an Temple risk falling out with Qing Yun Sect to save me, and why did you all?" His words were hurried, his voice extremely fast, but halfway through, he involuntarily stopped, Puhong Master's right hand stopped in midair, preventing him from continuing. Ghostly did not understand, looked bewilderedly at Puhong Master. Puhong Master lowered his head and chanted, got down from the meditation bed, stood up and said to Ghostly, "Before you ask me, let me bring you to meet someone first." Ghostly was surprised, said, "Meet someone, who is it?" Puhong did not answer, only walked out, his mouth unhurriedly said, "This person has wanted to meet you for a long time, and I know you must also want to meet him." Ghostly was stunned but subconsciously followed, for some reason, his palms were sweating, his heartbeat suddenly sped up, as if in front there was an existence that made him fearful. Feixiang had been quietly standing outside the meditation room, seeing Puhong Master bringing Ghostly out so quickly. His expression did not change, only took a step back and stood aside. Puhong Master glanced at him, nodded his head, did not speak and brought Ghostly to another direction, that was the last small courtyard in the 3 courtyards, leaning against a mountain wall. Note 1. Carvings of auspicious beasts on the eaves of the hall. It was a unique architectural regulation in China's ancient times. There were extremely detailed regulations on the number, from the emperor to the officials to the ordinary families. There were detailed regulations and could not be exceeded, otherwise it would be a crime of disrespect, enough to kill the entire family. A building with 10 auspicious beasts on the roof. Since ancient times, there was only one such building in the entire China. It was the Forbidden City's Supreme Harmony Hall, the only one in the world. This place is fictitious, all readers can just laugh and watch. Note 2. Burning incense and praying to Buddha. In China, where Buddhism was widely spread, it was very popular, or called Buddhist ceremony, or called Buddhist assembly. From Beijing's Yonghe Palace to the small temples in the southern Fujian villages, it was mostly like this. Watching his grandmother burn incense since young, until now it was still the same. When he started to write, he couldn't help but sigh. Chapter 341. The plain small courtyard was the same as the courtyard outside, a simple house leaning against the mountain wall, a small path in the middle paved with green bricks, leading to the door. Both sides were underbrush. It looked like no one was taking care of it seriously. Many places were already overgrown with weed. What was different from the meditation room outside, on the door of this house, there was a rather heavy black curtain, and other than this door, there did not seem to be any other windows or other exits in the house. Ghostly looked at this ordinary little house, a thirst in his throat, his hands involuntarily clenched tightly. He looked at Puhong Master. On Puhong Master's face also had a very complicated expression, like regret, like pain, indescribable, and he was also the same, staring at that small door in a daze. For a moment no one spoke. In the silence, only the weeds beside. From an unknown place, low sounds of insects were heard, not knowing what they were calling for. After a long time, Puhong Master softly sighed, said, "Let's go in." Ghostly's face twitched, quietly said, "All right." Puhong Master unhurriedly walked forward, stretched his hand to pull the curtain, with a creak, pushed open the door. The faint sound came from the door, not knowing how long it had been since someone pushed open this door, heavy and desolate. A gust of cold air suddenly rushed out from the house, even though Ghostly was still standing outside, but being hit by this gust of cold air, even with his level of cultivation, he still could not help but shivered. In this small house it seemed to be the coldest place in the world. Ghostly frowned, hesitated, and at this moment, Puhong Master's voice was heard from behind the curtain, "Young patron, come in." Ghostly took a deep breath, shook his head, stretched his hand to pull open the curtain, strided in. The curtain slowly fell, the door once again emitted a desolate creak, gently closed. The small courtyard once again regained its tranquility. Feixiang's figure slowly walked over, looked at that plain and unadorned little house, softly chanted and bowed, his face solemn and solemn. The curtain was lowered, the wooden door closed. Because there were no windows, the house immediately became dark. A bone-piercing chill instantly surged from all directions, as if countless ice-cold steel needles were about to pierce into his skin. Ghostly had just recovered from his illness. For a moment he shivered again, but he was after all not an ordinary person. With a few movements of the true way in his body, he slowly got used to it. Although the chill was unable to enter his body, the bone-piercing coldness was still extremely uncomfortable. This little hut on Mount Meru actually seemed even colder than the bitter cold of the extreme north ice fields. Ghostly was shocked. When he was bewildered, Puhong Master quietly sighed, said, "Junior brother, we are here to see you, this person you have wanted to meet for a long time." His voice was low and filled with a strange emotion. The chill in the room suddenly became even colder, almost enough to freeze a person's blood. Then, a strand of faint light, white with a faint silver light, slowly appeared in front of Puhong Master and Ghostly, at the end of the hut, lit up. That light was graceful and like snow. First a strand blossomed, and then at the edge of the light, another strand of silver-white light slowly lit up, but it got closer to it, merged into one. Following that, other strands of light lit up one after another. Gradually it could be seen, it was about 1 chi squared disc shape. That light was gentle, pure white like snow. The light did not rise more than 1 chi high. The ends seemed to have turned into specks of snowflakes, like white fireflies, gently dancing, slowly falling, almost like a dream. Following which, those strands of light slowly merged, gradually brightened. Ghostly and Puhong Master heard a sudden light whistle in the house, the clear sound pleasing to the ear. That white light flourished, instantly emitted brilliance, illuminating the entire house. In that instant Puhong Master lowered his head and chanted, while Ghostly, in that instant, felt his entire body's blood froze, could no longer feel any warmth, even, he could not feel his own heartbeat, seemed to have stopped in that instant. He just stood there like a stiff icicle, staring blankly at the depths of that light. There was no other thought in his mind, only 2 words reverberated in his mind. Puji. The faint light like snow, resplendent and flowing, emitted from a pure white jade-like disc, at the same time emitting an eerie chill. And on that 1 chi square disc, a person was sitting cross-legged. It was the person who changed Zhang Xiaofan's fate, engraved in Ghostly's bones and heart today. Puji. Looking from afar, Puji's face was lifelike, although his skin looked extremely pale, without a trace of vitality, but looking carefully, there were no signs of withering. Even to the extent that, he was still that compassionate and amiable old monk in Zhang Xiaofan's memory, there was not the slightest change, just that in his expression, there was an additional trace of faint pain. Other than his body, Puji's body, for some reason, had shrunk to half of its original size, and because of that, he could sit cross-legged on that pure white jade plate. Most likely the reason why the chilly air in this room was so strong but there were no piles of ice, most likely it was because of this treasure. And of course, Puji's body could be preserved for such a long time, most likely it was because of this treasure. Just that, Ghostly's mind could no longer think so much. That compassionate and amiable monk sitting on the jade plate was clearly deeply engraved in his heart. For more than 10 years, he did not forget it. Was it hate? Was it envy? His mind was sometimes empty, sometimes like a violent storm, thunder and lightning roared, thousands of pain, thousands of gratitude and grudges, for a moment all surfaced in his heart. That benevolent monk was the one who saved his life. He was the one who taught him the true Dharma and treated him like a son. But it was also this seemingly benevolent monk who ruined his life, causing him to suffer day and night, as if he had fallen into the abyss of hell. Gratitude and grudges intertwined. He thought it was only in his heart. Unexpectedly today, he saw his face again. Ghostly, in his agitation, could not stand properly, his head dizzy, his body fell to the side. And at this moment, a gentle and warm hand stretched out from the side, supported him, at the same time a familiar aura. It was the Buddhism true skill, great Brahman wisdom, emitted from that palm, incomparably thick, calmed down the surging blood in Ghostly's heart. Amitabha, young patron, don't be too agitated, take care of your body. Pu-hong Master's calm voice was heard softly from the side. Ghostly, like being startled awake from a dream, clenched his teeth, breathed deeply, let go of Pu-hong's hand, again stood up straight. However, his eyes had never left Puji's face. In the dim light on Puji's peaceful face, that trace of agony seemed to be even more profound. Pu-hong Master at the side carefully scrutinized ghostly in his eyes. This young man's painful and ever-changing face was changing in the dim light. Right now, Ghostly was no longer that evil sect sorcerer whose name shook the world, and was only a mortal suffering in his eyes, like that young man many years ago. He softly sighed, his eyes heavy, turned and looked at Puji, unhurriedly walked up, staring at Puji's face, quietly said, "Junior brother, your last wish before you died. As your senior brother I have already helped you to accomplish it. Senior brother is useless, unable to save you at that time. Evil karma begets evil, one has to taste the debt. This is what you said yourself at that time, hope that you will soon let go of your sins and reincarnate. Amit Ba." He put his palms together, facing Puji's body, bowed and then walked straight out. The moment he was about to step out, he faintly said, "Young patron, I think you also want to be alone with Puji junior brother for a while, right? I am in the meditation room in front. If you have any matters, just come and look for me." Ghostly did not speak, as if he did not hear. Right now in his eyes, there was only Puji monk in the dim light. Pu-hong Master sighed, opened the door, lifted the curtains and walked out. In the room, silence. Ghostly slowly moved his feet, little by little walked towards Puji. Chapter 342. He seemed to be afraid of something, at a loss of what to do. He obviously hated him so much, but for what reason? Right now, infinite sorrow surged out from his heart. That person quietly sat there, not the slightest anger, but seemed to be waiting for something. Even on his pained face, there seemed to be longing and anticipation. Ghostly slowly walked to him, stared at Puji, his hands slowly clenched, nails deeply sinking into his palms, but in the end he still loosened them. He seemed to have lost his support, powerless, just like that, quietly fell to the ground, sat in front of Puji without a word. The faint light flickered, shone on Puji and him, the two figures. Time, in this room, stopped, sometimes flowed backwards, sometimes jumped, but in the end what kind of souls did not change? Even though one was still beating, the other was already silent. Dong, 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 the morning bell rang once again, reverberating in every corner of Mount Meru. The sound was melodious, waking people up from their dreams, but it also had a feeling that it could take people away from the mundane world. Mount Meru, Little Tian-in Temple, outside the quiet meditation room, a knocking sound was heard. Pu-hong Master raised his brows and then shook his head slightly, sighed and said, "Is it Fa-siong? Come in." Fa-siong answered and entered, walked over and bowed to Pu-hong Master, looking at his face. There seemed to be a trace of worry, said, "Teacher, it has already been a day and night, Zhang patron still has not come out." Pu-hong Master shook his head, said, "A lifetime of bad karma, a lifetime of love and hatred, how can it be so easy to let it go, let it go?" Fa-siong put his palms together, quietly said, "Yes." And then frowned, spoke to Pu-hong Master, "Teacher, I am worried that there is jade ice dish in the small room. Although it can protect Puji teacher uncle's body, but the extreme cold energy is extremely harmful to normal people. And Zhang patron has just recovered from his serious injuries and his mind is in a mess. The pain is unbearable, if there is any lingering illness. How can we be worthy of Puji teacher uncle's last words?" Pu-hong Master indifferently said, "No matter. Yesterday I have already used the great Brahman wisdom to protect his heart arteries and veins, in addition to his own cultivation, although the cold air is poisonous, but it should be fine." Fa-siong then heaved a sigh of relief, put his palms together and said, "I see, disciple is also relieved." Pu-hong Master nodded, at the same time glanced at Fa-siong, said, "I see you are very concerned about this Zhang patron. Although there is your Puji teacher uncle's last words but to you, you also seem to see him in a different light. Feixiang smiled and said, Master has a discerning eye, it is indeed so. As he spoke, he seemed to recall the past and sighed. I won't hide it from Master. 10 years have passed since I first met Benefactor Zhang. In the past 10 years, your disciples' Buddhist studies and cultivation have made small progress, but in this life, it is like a baby walking on the road, there is almost no change. Only this Benefactor Zhang, observing his life, he has experienced perilous waves and perilous waves, great sorrow and great suffering, gratitude and grudges, love and hatred, all kinds of pain mentioned by Buddha. He has actually tasted them all. Puhong Master was slightly moved, put his palms together and softly chanted the name of Buddha. Feixiang continued, Disciple had once when I was unable to sleep at night, thought of this Benefactor Zhang, had once used his body as a substitute, imagine all these kinds of pain happening to disciple. Unfortunately disciples' Buddhist studies are not deep enough, fear rose in me. Buddha said the flesh and skin, in the end it is only dust, only this way of the heart, the important thing is to understand. Every time I think of this, I would think of Benefactor Zhang's rough life. Now that you are still able to hold on, disciple really admires you. Speaking till here, Feixiang's expression suddenly changed, knelt down before Puhong Master. Puhong Master was surprised, said, Why are you doing this? Feixiang quietly said, Master above, disciples' cultivation is shallow and my understanding of Buddhism is not deep, yet facing a character like Benefactor Zhang, I really cannot bear to suffer from his inner demons. May Benefactor Teacher use your great power, use our Buddha's boundless power to enlighten and guide him. Use Buddhism's compassion to dissolve his vicious tendencies, help him to escape from the inner demons and bitterness. This is also a matter of great merit and virtue, the heaven's benevolence. I can also comfort Puji teacher uncle who passed away. Master is merciful. After speaking, his hands prostrated on the ground, continuously bowed 3 times. Puhong Master shook his head and sighed, said, Foolish child! Foolish child! Knowing your words, it instead aroused the precepts of anger. Furthermore, it is not that teacher does not wish to enlighten this person, but because he has experienced many difficulties, his life full of ups and downs, until today, his will is already as firm as a rock, not ordinary people can sway his heart. As the saying goes, Buddha is in the human heart, all living beings have fate with Buddha, in the future he will sink into the sea of bitterness, or turn back to paradise, it is all in his heart, we have no power to exert on him. Feixiang slowly stood up, lowered his head and put his palms together, disappointment could not help but on his face. He still quietly said, Yes, disciple understands. Puhong pondered for a moment, said, You better go to the small house at the back to take a look at him. Although the cold air in the house should be fine, but with his current condition, not eating or drinking for a day, it is not a good thing. Feixiang replied, composed himself and walked out of the house. When he was about to open the door, suddenly saw a person standing outside. The sunlight shone in from behind. That person's face was covered in shadows. For the moment he could not see the face clearly. Feixiang was shocked, stepped back and then saw clearly that it was ghostly, not knowing when he had arrived at the door, quietly standing there. One day and one night, Ghostly did not look tired, but his face had turned extremely pale, his eyes bloodshot. Most likely he had not slept for the entire night. When he saw it was Feixiang, Ghostly's lips moved, slowly nodded to Feixiang. Feixiang was stunned for a moment, put his palms together and returned the greeting. Ghostly then slowly walked in, stood opposite Puhong Master. Puhong Master was still the same as yesterday, sitting cross-legged on the meditation bed, his hands holding the prayer beads, constantly turning. Seeing Ghostly hesitating to speak, he did not find it strange, faintly said to Feixiang, Bring a chair for the young patron, you also sit down. Feixiang acknowledged, pulled a chair over for Ghostly to sit, himself also sat at the side. Puhong Master was silent for a moment, said, "If you have anything to ask me now, just go ahead and ask." Ghost Li's eyes seemed to be wandering, as if his state of mind had not calmed down yet. After a long while, he was heard quietly saying, "Why did your Tian temple want to save me?" Puhong Master put his palms together and said, "Everything has a cause and effect. Patron's bumpy situation today is mostly because of Tian Temple Puji Junior Brothers' evil karma. Since it is so, Tian Temple cannot leave you in the lurch." Ghostly snorted, said, "Doing this, aren't you afraid Qing Yun's sect will fall out with you?" Puhong Master smiled and said, "I am afraid." Ghostly heard him being so straightforward, was shocked, said, "Then you all still?" Puhong Master shook his head and said, "Tian Temple and Qing Yun's sect have been on good terms for generations. Generations of ancestors have instructed, not to destroy at will. That's why I ordered them to wrap themselves in black, to snatch you back without leaving a trace." Ghostly sneered and said, "Qing Yun's sect's experts are as numerous as the clouds. What if your tracks are exposed?" Puhong Master indifferently said, "I ordered them to hide their tracks, is in consideration of the harmony between the two sects, do not wish for the two good faction sects to be at odds, so I did this. But if there really is an accident, then it's nothing, to save Patron Yu, we might have to fall out." Ghostly stared at Puhong Master, in a deep voice said, "What exactly is it for, to save me at all costs?" Puhong Master this time kept quiet. Ghostly did not pursue, only stared at him. After a long time, Puhong Master heaved a long sigh and said, "Do you want to know, when Puji Junior Brother was dying, after struggling to return to Tian Temple until he passed away?" Ghost Li's body shook. For a moment he could not speak, looking at the pain in his eyes, as if his heart was in a perilous situation again. Finally, he quietly said, "Yes." For some reason, his voice sounded hoarse. Chapter 343. That was something that happened more than 10 years ago, but in my mind, it seemed to be the same as what happened yesterday, so clear and clear, I have not forgotten a bit. Puhong Master's voice calmly and slowly drifted in the house. He started to narrate the past. I remember very clearly it was a cloudy day, gloomy. That day, since morning, I felt a little restless, but I couldn't tell what was wrong. I couldn't help but be distracted from my usual homework. This situation was very rare. I myself also did not know why, so my mood was not very good. Just like that, until evening, I heard the evening drums sounded. The sky was gradually turning dark. I then felt better. At that time, I just felt that most likely my cultivation was not enough and was distracted for a moment. Unexpectedly, when the sky was about to turn dark, suddenly, I heard a sharp cry from Tian Temple's door. Speaking till here, Puhong Master turned his head and looked at Fa Xiang. Fa Xiang nodded and said, "Yes, at that time Disciple was patrolling the mountain. Suddenly I saw someone fainted on the ground not far from the temple. Disciple quickly went over to check, unexpectedly. It was Puji Teacher Uncle." He sighed and said, "Puji Teacher Uncle was unconscious, his face extremely haggard, only his cheeks for some reason had a strange red color. Until later I then found out, it was because Puji Teacher Uncle, in order to temporarily prolong his life, took the rare medicine 3 days must die pill." Ghostly was stunned for a moment. This pill's name was really unheard of, could not help but asked, "What 3 days must die pill?" Puhong Master said, "This medicine is not used in the right way. It was said that in the past in the evil sect, a strange person called Ghost Doctor concocted it out of his wildest imagination. I heard that as long as you take this pill, even if you have a dying injury, this medicine can also stimulate your body's potential, let you live for 3 more days, and in these 3 days, you can barely maintain a normal person's physical strength. However, once 3 days had passed, the medicine would turn into the world's #1 poison. Even if one's body was in good condition and had a high cultivation base, he would not be able to fight against the strange medicinal properties of the strange medicine and would die without a doubt. That's why it was given such a strange name. Ghostly was silent. Puhong Master continued, At that time naturally we did not know so much, just that after I received Fasyong disciple's urgent report, I turned pale with fright. Puji junior brother is gifted and intelligent, his skills are profound, he has always been an outstanding figure in our Tianyin temple, I did not expect that he would become like this. At that time, I immediately ordered people to carry him in and treat him in the meditation room. However, he remained unconscious, and the qi in his body was scattered. Not only was he poisoned, his body was also seriously injured by someone with extremely high cultivation. He had actually reached the point where he was like a lamp that ran out of oil. Puhong Master spoke until here, although it had been more than 10 years, but his face still revealed a sorrowful expression. Clearly the events that happened that year dealt a huge blow to him. That night, I tried my best to save Puji junior brother, but no matter how I used up all the elixirs, exhausted my true essence, I could not wake Puji junior brother up. Seeing his breath getting weaker and weaker, my heart was in agony. Don't tell me this junior brother of mine actually died without knowing the reason? His body was so heavily injured, even if he died a few days earlier it would not be surprising, just that he forced himself to return to Tianyin Temple. Naturally before he died, he had something to say to us, or maybe there was something important that he had to account to us. Puhong Master spoke until here, heaved a long sigh, became silent as if in his mind, that period of time again surfaced. After a long while, Fasyong coughed softly said, Teacher, I had always been with you and Puji teacher uncle, why don't I narrate on behalf of you and Puji teacher uncle? Puhong Master silently nodded, did not speak. Fasyong coughed once and continued, I had always been with teacher, watch teacher and Pufong teacher uncle, and the rest tried their best to save Puji teacher uncle, but it was all to no avail. I was also burning with anxiety. Puji teacher uncle treated me extremely well in the past, only hated that my skills were shallow and unable to do anything for him. Unexpectedly, just when teacher uncle and I were at our wits' end, that night, Puji teacher uncle actually woke up on his own. Ghostly raised his eyebrows, softly made a low cry, and then he quickly controlled himself. His face again turned cold. Fasyong glanced at him, continued, It was me who was on night duty to protect Puji teacher uncle. In my great surprise and joy, I immediately called teacher and Pufong teacher uncle over. Although it had already been more than 10 years, but I still remember Puji teacher uncle's face that night. His face was lifeless and dispirited, but only his cheeks were crimson red like it was about to drip blood. It was really terrifying. Seeing Puji teacher uncle suddenly getting better, teacher and we were all very happy, although Puji teacher uncle's expression was strange, but for the moment we could not care so much. At that time teacher was about to ask Puji teacher uncle what exactly happened, how did he get injured to such an extent? Unexpectedly, Puji teacher uncle once saw teacher, Fasyong paused for a moment, actually trying to compose himself. At this moment, the room was silent. Puhong Master closed his eyes, softly chanted, the prayer beads in his hands rotated lightly, Ghostly instead concentrated and listened carefully. Fasyong, for some reason, his expression turned ugly but eventually still continued. After Puji teacher uncle woke up, he had been rather quiet. Unexpectedly when teacher heard the news and rushed over, the moment he saw teacher, suddenly, as if he was agitated by something, his entire body started to tremble. He actually leapt up from the bed and sat up. Me, teacher and Pufong teacher uncle were all shocked. Puji teacher uncle's face was as red as blood, a pair of eyes staring intently at teacher, stretched out his withered hand, pointing at teacher. Teacher immediately walked over, held Puji teacher uncle's hand, was about to ask Puji teacher uncle actually. A trace of hesitation flashed past Fasyong's face, glanced at Puhong Master, Puhong Master's expression did not change, still with his eyes closed and palms clasped together. Feixiang pondered for a moment, continued, Puji teacher uncle once held teacher's hand. Suddenly, he seemed to have completely collapsed like a child, leaned on teacher and started wailing loudly. What? Ghostly heard until here, for a moment forgot his emotions, stood up in shock, stared at Feixiang. In his heart, that Puji divine monk, no matter what he had done, the impression he left, would he be such a person? Feixiang sighed, said, At that time the three of us were also stunned, at a loss, did not know what exactly happened to Puji teacher uncle, why would he behave so strangely? But looking at Puji teacher uncle, he looked extremely remorseful, in so much pain that he wished he was dead. We also did not know what to do. At that time we only remember Puji teacher uncle crying bitterly, said to teacher, Senior brother, junior brother deserves to die, committed a heinous sin, even if I die 10,000 times, it will not be able to make up for 10,000th of it. The corner of Ghost Li's eyes twitched fiercely, but he did not say a word. Feixiang's voice was deep, unhurriedly said, At that time the shock in my heart was really at its maximum, and looking at teacher uncle's expression, obviously he also had the same thoughts. Just that the situation at that time, Puji teacher uncle's demeanor was crazy, almost to the point of insanity. We had no choice but to persuade him with kind words, hoping that he would have a good rest first, if there were anything we could talk about it after his injuries were healed. But Puji teacher uncle insisted, and said that in order to return to Tian'an Temple to meet everyone, he had already taken the 3 days must die pill. In less than a day and night, he would definitely die. Before he died, he had an extremely important matter to inform teacher uncle, and entrusted an important matter to them. If we did not listen to him, even if he died, he would not be able to rest in peace. When we heard till here, we were all shocked and anxious, but in front of Puji teacher uncle, we eventually had no choice but to let him speak. Originally I thought that Puji teacher uncle with his serious injuries, most likely was not in his right mind, who knew that after he said that, he actually said such an evil deed that goes against Buddha's heart and human relations, his sins boundless. Puhong Master quietly sighed, placed his palms together and chanted, Amitabha Buddha. Feixiang heard it, also placed his palms together and chanted, and then looked at Ghost Li, watched his face gradually turning ashen, continued, Puji teacher uncle tightly held teacher's hand, while narrating, tears streamed down his aged face. The few of us who were listening at the side, were more and more shocked, almost to the point that our hair stood on end. Puji teacher uncle said, in order to realize his wish to comprehend Buddhism and Taoism as one, a few days ago he once again went up to Qingyun Hill to pay his respects to Qingyun's sect head Reverend Daoxian, to express his views. Unfortunately he was rejected by Reverend Daoxian. In his disappointment, he strolled down the mountain, came to a small village at the foot of Qingyun Hill. That small village was called Grass Temple Village. Apa! A muffled sound, almost at the same time as the 3 words Grass Temple Village. Ghost Li's hand holding onto the table, in his agitation, he forcefully twisted off a corner of the table, crushed it into powder, sprinkled it down from his palms. Feixiang glanced at that table, secretly sighed in his heart but continued, that day when Puji teacher uncle walked into Grass Temple Village, temporarily rested in a dilapidated small temple at the back of the village, accidentally saw a group of youths fooling around. Just that after 2 of the youths quarreled, the youths could not let go and almost did something regrettable. Luckily Puji teacher uncle acted in time and saved one of the youths. The expression on Ghost Li's face changed once again. His fists were tightly clenched and a painful expression clearly appeared in his eyes. Chapter 344. Puji teacher uncle initially did not take this matter to heart, just that the sky was gloomy at that time, as if a storm was approaching. He decided to rest for a night in that dilapidated temple before leaving. Unexpectedly on that night, something happened. Ghost Lee's head buried deeply, not letting anyone else see his face. The memories like knives, like deeply cutting into his heart, blood like a fountain, unstoppable. Ephasion's voice slowly reverberated. It was night. Puji teacher uncle suddenly woke up from his meditation, discovered that a black-attired evil man had sneaked into Grasstemple village, intending to abduct an extremely talented youth. Puji teacher uncle naturally could not sit back and do nothing, so he saved that youth, but the matter was strange. He did not expect that black-attired evil man to be so vicious and cunning, actually used that youth as a cover. His target was Puji teacher uncle instead. That black-attired evil man secretly placed the world's most lethal poison, seven-tailed centipede, on that youth, poisoned Puji teacher uncle, and then while Puji teacher uncle was distracted, he used evil sect evil skills to severely injure Puji teacher uncle. And it was at that time, Puji teacher uncle then understood, the black-attired evil man's various vicious methods, was because of that great evil object, sinister orb sealed in Puji teacher uncle's body. Ghost Lee's shoulders moved, but he did not raise his head. In his sleeves, indistinctly came the familiar cold breath from the sinister orb, thousands of feelings, thousands of emotions and enmity. When all of them surged into the heart, how would you feel? He was silent, speechless, only his entire body tensed up, involuntarily, lightly trembling. Although that evil man's methods were sinister and vicious, but Puji teacher uncle's skills were after all extremely profound. Although he was seriously injured, he still used the great Buddhist supernatural powers and fought with that evil man. Both of them were injured, although he himself was seriously injured and on the verge of death. He still succeeded in scaring that evil man away temporarily. Just that in this process, Puji teacher uncle was shocked to discover that person actually knew Qin Yun's sect Taoism true ways and skills. Obviously he was inextricably linked with Qin Yun's sect. When Puji teacher uncle was fighting with that evil person, for some reason, that young man whom he saved in the day, also quietly came to the broken temple. After a few fierce battles, that child was affected and fainted. After the fight, Puji teacher uncle scared that black-attired sorcerer away, but he was already at the end of his rope, seriously injured and dying. He had no choice but to swallow a 3 days must-die pill that he obtained by chance in the past to extend his life. Firstly, he knew that he was going to die and his mind was in a mess. Secondly, he was worried that the evil person would come back to kill him. Although he was not afraid, there were so many villagers in the Grasstemple village. He was afraid that the evil person would kill them all. Wouldn't he have committed a heinous sin? He originally had the intention to seek help from Qin Yunhil, but that sorcerer obviously had a deep relationship with Qin Yunhil. If something bad happened to him on the mountain, he would not be afraid of losing his own life, but wouldn't he be wasting many lives? Ephasion's face was desolate, as if he was grieving over the desperate situation that Puji was in. Many years ago, Puji teacher uncle had once traveled the world. In the western Great Marsh, he unintentionally subdued the world's most ferocious strange object, sinister orb, with heaven's benevolent heart. He used Buddhism's supernatural powers to suppress this ferocious object and carried it with him day and night to prevent it from harming the people. Just that this sinister orb's ferocious energy was innate. Although the Buddhist powers protected him, it still quietly corroded Puji teacher uncle's mind. Just that usually with the Buddhist powers protecting him, it was not seen. That day Puji teacher uncle faced a desperate situation. He was going to die and there were people beside him who would be implicated, and his great wish of understanding Buddhism and Taoism for his whole life looked like it was going to turn into a bubble. He couldn't help but felt agitated and greatly grieved. Unexpectedly, in that seemingly desperate situation, he actually had a whimsical idea, thought of another path, to realize his great wish. Ghost Lee's breathing slowly hastened. Ephasion paused for a moment, slowly said, Puji teacher uncle actually thought of privately imparting Tian Temple Buddhism supreme true way great Brahman wisdom to a youth and then let this youth think of a way to join Qing Yun. In this way, he could realize his lifetime's great wish. At that time he was brooding over the matter of Buddhism and Taoism enlightenment. Once he thought of that, it was like grasping at a life-saving straw, refused to give up. After weighing the pros and cons, he chose that youth whom he saved, imparted to him the true way incantation of great Brahman wisdom, at the same time instructed him not to divulge the secret to outsiders, placed his lifetime's wish all on that youth. He. Ghost Lee's extremely suppressed laughter flowed out from his drooping face, carrying some desolation, some bitterness and even some choking with sobs. Not sure if he was laughing at Puji, filled with endless hatred, or was he resenting the heaven, lamenting his fate. Xiang waited for his laughter, a trace of sadness surfaced on his face, continued, after everything was settled, Puji teacher uncle casted his spell to let that youth sleep again, and right now because of the 3 days must die pill's effect, his physical strength was already gradually recovering. Initially he intended to leave and rush back to Tian Temple within 3 days, to make arrangements for his funeral. Unexpectedly at this moment, he suddenly remembered, Qing Yun's sect is very strict in accepting disciples, and in order to keep the important matter a secret, the youth he chose was not that kind of rare talent that appears once in 1,000 years. Thinking carefully, Qing Yun's sect might not be able to take this youth in. Seeing that his lifetime's greatest wish was about to be fulfilled, and he was not far from death, Puji teacher uncle's mind was in a mess. In addition, after he was seriously injured, his Buddhism cultivation was already greatly impaired. Far from usual, the vicious energy in his body, which was corroded by the sinister orb, at this moment acted up, finally committing an irreversible sin. When Puji teacher uncle's mind was in turmoil, attacked by that vicious energy, in his confusion, he only knew how to rack his brains to think of how to fulfill his wish. In his messy thoughts, he actually thought that as long as that youth became an orphan, and it was an extremely serious incident, because it was at the foot of Qing Yun Hill, Qing Yun's sect would definitely not sit back and do nothing. Puhong Master's face suddenly revealed a sorrowful expression, the prayer beads in his hands suddenly sped up, his mouth also chanting incessantly. So, Xiang's voice at this moment started to tremble. Puji teacher uncle actually thought of how to let this child become an orphan, so that he could enter Qing Yun's sect. At that time, his consciousness had already completely lost his nature, completely controlled by the sinister orb's evil energy. Finally, he slowly walked into Grass Temple village, started killing, and after seeing the first blood, he completely could not control himself. His ferocious nature burst out. He actually massacred the 200-odd people in Grass Temple village, committed this heinous sin. Enough, don't say any more. Suddenly, Ghostly loudly shouted out, abruptly stood up, on his face, it was already full of tears. Don't say any more. His voice was hoarse, choking with sobs. Xiang was silent, slowly lowered his head. On the meditation bed, Puhong Master opened his eyes, slowly got off the bed, walked to Ghostly, stretched out his hand and gently caressed Ghostly's shoulder, quietly said, "Child, if you want to cry and want to scold, feel free to cry and scold. But what happened that day, you still have to finish listening to it." Ghostly choked with sobs. Puhong Master quietly said, when Puji Junior brother regained his consciousness, the grave mistake had already been made. Standing in the mountain of corpses and sea of blood, as if struck by lightning, he was completely dumbstruck. A lifetime of meritorious cultivation, not to mention going down the drain, he harmed so many innocent people, such a heinous sin, almost made his heart torn and lungs torn. And in that muddle-headed state, he rushed back to Tian Temple in a daze, saw me, it was not for anything else but to explain everything to me, state clearly the sins that he had committed. In the midst of his remorse, He begged me on account of our 100 years of brotherhood, to redeem 1/10,000th of his sins, in the future no matter what, as long as you are in trouble, I must try my best to help. Ghostly tried his best to suppress his emotions, but he was helpless. He had not cried for several decades, as if a man who was always as strong as iron, right now had turned into a tearful man. But his teeth were tightly biting his lips, deeply sinking in, a trace of blood slowly flowed out from the corner of his mouth. It was caused by his overly agitated state of mind, biting the corner of his mouth. Puhong Master's expression was disappointed, said, Puji junior brother, he left behind these final matters. The poison acted up and finally passed away. On his deathbed, he instructed not to cremate and bury his remains, to use jade iceplate to protect it, leaving this body, hoping in the future if that young man called Zhang Xiaofan knows the truth, then invite him to come here, let him deal with this sinful body. Flogging and scolding can also be done, grind the bones and scatter the ashes can also be done. The monks of Tian'an Temple cannot interfere, to redeem 1/10,000th of his sins. Ghostly suddenly raised his head. Puhong Master looked straight into his eyes, his face solemn and solemn, slowly said, What I am saying, you understand right. That day junior brother's dying wish, I have already completed it for him. Now how you want to deal with it, it is up to you. That small house in the backyard, whatever you wish to do, just go over there. Ghostly clenched his teeth, his eyes deep, stared at Puhong Master. For some reason, Puhong Master was not willing to look at him, slowly looked away. Ghostly's panting became louder and louder, his chest heaving up and down, the expression on his face changing rapidly. Suddenly, he seemed to have made up his mind, abruptly turned and strode out, listening to his footsteps. He was heading towards that last small house. Fei Xiang's countenance changed greatly, exclaimed, Teacher! Puhong Master slowly shook his head, an unspeakable deep pain on his face, quietly said, Let him be. That is also your Puji teacher uncle's last wish. The affairs of the world are so bitter, how many people are able to accept it? Ba. He gently clasped his palms together, silently chanted, in the room, instantly became quiet. Terrifyingly quiet. Chapter 345. The leisurely morning bell, the heavy evening drum, Mount Meru bathed in the misty clouds. From the rising sun to the afterglow of the evening, the wind and clouds in the sky changed, the white clouds rolled past, time in the end did not stop for anyone. Tian'an Temple was majestic and magnificent, towering over Mount Meru, like a compassionate giant looking at the world. Innumerable mortals gathered from all directions in the morning, prostrated and worshipped the deity statues in the Buddhist temple hall, telling their own happy or sad wishes, praying for the deity's blessings and blessings. Millions of people came, gathered, thousands of people dispersed, parted day after day. It had never changed, gathering and dispersing like years. Only that golden deities in the temple, the unextinguished lamp in front of the hall, smoke curling up in spirals, saw the vicissitudes of the world. Ghostly, or rather Zhang Xiaofan, once again entered the small house where Puji divine monk's body was. Another day and night passed. In between, there was not the slightest movement in that small house. Puhong Master once went to the small courtyard outside the house, after standing for a long time, again sighed and left. Only Fei Xiang, ever since Ghostly entered that room, he had been standing in the courtyard outside the house, with an unexpected patience, waiting. Nobody knew why Fei Xiang wanted to stand there, but including Puhong Master, the other Tian'an Temple monks did not ask him, and Fei Xiang also stood there alone and persistently, as if waiting for something. The setting sun was like blood, reflecting the sunset glow in the western horizon. Looking from afar, there seemed to be a thin layer of golden light at the edge of the clouds, extremely beautiful. The beautiful scenery of heaven and earth was actually by your side. It was just whether you looked or not, whether you had the intention or not. Fei Xiang gazed into the distance at the sunset glow, lost in thought. He who had stood for a day and night, His delicate face did not seem to have the slightest tiredness, instead his clear eyes glimmered with profound wisdom. "What are you looking at?" Suddenly, a voice was heard beside him. Fa Xiang was startled, woke up from his thoughts. Pu Hong Master had come to this courtyard again, standing beside him, smiling at him. Fa Xiang put his palms together and replied, "Reporting to Master, disciple was gazing at the sunset in the western sky when I suddenly had an epiphany and was lost in thought. I didn't know that Master had arrived. I have neglected you." Pu Hong Master smiled and said, "Mere common customs, don't mind. I wonder what you comprehended from that sunset glow in the western sky." Fa Xiang pondered for a moment and said, "Disciple has been standing here for a day and a night, watching the stars at night and seeing the blue sky during the day, until now the bustling has subsided and the rising sun has sunk to the east, leaving only a few rays of light to illuminate the western sky. I don't feel sorrow in my heart. Life is like this, time is like this, everything in the world is like this. For a moment, I didn't know that I was born in this world, so insignificant like a grain in the ocean. What is the meaning of living?" Pu Hong Master nodded and said, "You indeed have extraordinary wisdom, disciple. Everything in the world had their own destiny, so even though they were ever-changing, there was still a Tao that couldn't be defied. It's already very impressive that you can comprehend this level of truth from the rising and setting of the sun." Fa Xiang respectfully bowed to Pu Hong Master, said, "Thank you, teacher, for your praise. Disciple does not deserve it. Just that although disciple had some enlightenment, the bewilderment in my heart instead increased and became bigger. Disciple does not understand, since the destiny has been decided, all living things will eventually wither, these countless people busy their lives, entangled in worldly gratitude, grudges and love. Why? My Buddha said to deliver all living beings from suffering. All living beings can also be converted, but the living beings might not be willing to be converted by my Buddha. Why is that? Could it be that Buddha said the Western paradise, no grudges, no hatred, heartless, no desires, actually cannot attract all living beings? Disciple is ignorant, teacher, please enlighten me." After speaking, Fa Xiang lowered his head, placed his palms together and chanted. Pu Hong Master watched Fa Xiang for a long time, slowly nodded, a trace of smile on his face, but did not answer immediately, instead looked at the sunset glow in the western sky that Fa Xiang was looking at. After a moment, said, "What you saw just now, was it this sunset glow in the western sky?" Fa Xiang said, "Yes, disciple saw this time flying by, the rising sun setting in the western sky. Time no longer exists. My heart is sorrowful and bewildered, so I asked teacher." Pu Hong Master smiled and said, "After a while, this setting sun will completely set. At that time, even this sunset glow will not be seen." Fa Xiang was slightly bewildered, did not know what Pu Hong Master meant, could only reply, said, "That's right." Pu Hong Master indifferently looked at the western sky horizon, saw that setting sun slowly setting, the sky getting darker and darker, dusk was approaching, indifferently said, "The setting sun is heartless, cannot be held back. But tomorrow morning, will you still be able to see this rising sun?" Fa Xiang's body shook. His heart seemed to be moved, for a moment he could not speak, his face looked thoughtful. Pu Hong Master turned back to look at Fa Xiang, smiled faintly and did not speak again. The sky gradually darkened, the setting sun finally completely set. Not long after, a bright moon was seen slowly rising from the eastern sky, moonlight like water, dazzling clear splendor, spilling onto the mortal world. In the night, Tian Temple under the moonlight was quiet and serene, although not as bustling as it was during the day, but it had another kind of quiet and serene beauty. And in little Tian Temple at Mount Meru, in that small courtyard, teacher and disciple both did not speak a word, quietly stood in the courtyard, in the mountain breeze that gently brushed past and fluttered the corner of their clothes, quietly stood there. Not knowing how much time had passed, the moon was near the middle of the sky, in the quiet courtyard, suddenly a burst of light laughter was heard. Xiang's face was filled with joy, stepped forward a few steps, walked to the middle of the courtyard, looked up at the moon, the dazzling moonlight, spilling onto his moon-white monk robe, like frost and snow. Xiang laughed, turned around and knelt down to Puhong Master, who had been smiling and standing beside, put his palms together and bowed, said, "Thank you, teacher, for your guidance, disciple is enlightened." Puhong Master's eyes were filled with gratification, right now looking at his disciple kneeling in front of him, even though he had long cultivated to the state of being indifferent to favor or humiliation. His face also revealed a sincere expression of joy. He stretched out his hand and gently caressed Xiang's head, said 3 words in succession. "Good! Good! Good! You are talented and rare in the world. But more importantly, you have a different level of wisdom towards Buddhist studies and Buddhist principles. At that time among us 4 senior and junior brothers, your Puji teacher uncle was the most intelligent. Unfortunately, although he was intelligent, but he took the wrong path, delayed his Buddhism studies, vainly sought for immortality, and finally ended up in such an unbearable end. Today you are enlightened. It is your good fortune, and also our Tian Yin Temple's good fortune." Xiang was surprised, looked up at Puhong Master, said, "Teacher, what do you mean? Disciple does not understand." Puhong Master shook his head, first stretched out his hand to help Xiang up, and then the joy on his face gradually faded, faintly said, "These few years, teacher has been engrossed in mundane affairs day and night, to the extent that my understanding of Buddhism has stagnated, yet I have wrongly accepted this worldly reputation, half a lifetime of struggle, unable to give it up. That year after your Puji teacher uncle passed away, teacher had the intention to live in seclusion, but helplessly there was no one under me, facing this founder's foundation, although it is a worldly possession, but in the end I cannot easily give it up. Now that I have you, I can go without worry." Xiang was shocked, his face turned pale. His body that had just stood up immediately knelt down again, anxiously said, "Teacher, what are you saying? How can Tian Yin Temple leave you? Moreover, disciple also have to accompany teacher day and night, listen to your teachings. But I beg teacher to never abandon disciple and Tian Yin Temple disciples and live in seclusion." After speaking, he kowtowed incessantly. Puhong Master laughed in spite of himself and then sighed, pulled Xiang up, sighed and said, foolish child, how can there be any banquet that does not come to an end? But the matter of teacher going into seclusion is not urgent, it is not something that can be achieved in a short period of time, you don't have to be anxious, you have to settle everything properly, then I can be at ease." Xiang's eyes were glistening with tears, but in the end he knew that Puhong Master's intention to go into seclusion was unstoppable, fortunately like what teacher said, although he had the intention but it was not urgent yet, in the future when there is a chance, he will try to persuade teacher. Thinking of that, he stopped with tears in his eyes, stood aside. Puhong Master looked up at the sky, saw the moonlight shining through, sad and beautiful. He gazed for a long time, suddenly said, "Let's go in and see that young patron." Xiang was surprised, said, "What?" Puhong Master indifferently said, "Right and wrong, gratitude and grudges, feelings and enmity, no matter what, there will eventually be a result." After speaking, he did not speak any more, walked towards that small house. Xiang slowly followed behind him, watching that door getting closer and closer. For some reason, his heart started to feel nervous. Chapter 346. One day and one night, in that time, facing Puji teacher uncle, what exactly did Ghostly do? What would he do? The answer, when they lifted the curtains and pushed open the wooden door, quietly walked into the house, appeared in front of them. Inside the empty house, the silver light from the jade ice plate was still flickering. Nothing happened. Puji body was still sitting cross-legged on the jade ice plate, and opposite him, Ghostly, or rather Zhang Xiaofan, sat cross-legged, his back facing Puhong Master and Xiang, quietly watching Puji's face in the faint light. Puhong Master breathed deeply, was about to speak when he suddenly felt a movement behind him, turned around and looked. It was Ephaesiong gently pulling his sleeve. After seeing Puhong Master turning around, he signaled with his eyes, looked below Ghost Li's body. Puhong Master turned and looked, couldn't help but frowned. Nothing in the house had changed, only where Ghost Li was sitting cross-legged, within 3 chi radius of the floor, cracks were everywhere, densely packed fine cracks crawled all over the ground around him. The closer it was to his body, the denser the cracks. Within 1 chi radius of his body, all of the bricks were no longer cracked, instead completely turned into powder. This one day and one night, nobody knew what exactly happened to Ghost Li. Perhaps no one would ever know. Puhong Master slowly walked to Ghost Li, glanced at the ground, using a calm voice, said, "Patron, you have already stayed here for 1 day and 1 night, have you thought it through?" Ghost Li slowly looked away from Puji's body, looked at Puhong Master. Puhong Master's heart shook, Ghost Li's face was pale, his face tired, although he had only sat here for 1 day and 1 night, but his face looked weathered by the vicissitudes of life, had already experienced 100 years of life. Puhong Master placed his palms together, softly chanted, Amitabha Buddha. Ghost Li slowly stood up but halfway, suddenly his body trembled. His footing was unsteady. Ephaesiong and Puhong frowned. When Ephaesiong was about to go up to support him, Ghost Li had already steadied himself, inhaled deeply and then again stood up straight, facing Puhong Master. His body was obviously weak, but for some reason, right now he seemed as tall and sturdy as Mount Meru. "Master." His voice was a little hoarse. Puhong Master placed his palms together. "Yes, what instructions does young patron have?" "Let the dead rest in peace, cremate him. Master Puji's Dharmakaya and bury him." Puhong Master and Fa were shocked, looked at Ghost Li. The next moment, Puhong Master heaved a long sigh, quietly said, "Patron, have you gotten over it?" Ghost Li smiled sadly, glanced at Puji who was sitting cross-legged in the faint light. The muscles on his face tightened and then relaxed, unhurriedly said, "I only had a one-night stand with this master, but I had once knelt before him, willingly kowtowed to him, called him teacher. He saved me, but he also harmed me. But without him, there would be no me, and the dead would be dead. Although I'm not a disciple of Buddhism, I know that Buddhism values reincarnation the most. He refused to be buried even before he died, so it's obvious that he was filled with regret." An icy cold air, indistinctly emitted from his hands. Puhong Master and Fa almost at the same time felt it, that surging strange evil power. The sinister orb evil power is fierce. These few years I have experienced it personally, more or less understand the reason. Speaking until here, Ghost Li slowly turned around, walked towards the door. His hoarse voice occasionally emitted a cough or two. Puhong Master and Fa were at the same time behind him, facing his back figure, placed their palms together and chanted. Puhong Master then said, "Young patron's benevolence, touch the heaven and earth. Old monk here on behalf of the deceased unfilial junior brother Puji thank patron. Old monk will solemnly obey patron's instructions. Later I will cremate junior brother's Dharmakaya and bury him. Just that before this, patron has any other instructions?" Ghost Li had already walked to the door, his hand stretched towards the door, but after a moment, he paused. His entire body seemed to freeze there. Puhong Master and Fa did not know his intentions, for the moment only looked at him, did not speak. Ghost Li slowly turned around, once again saw that old and slightly pained face. This face, he had only seen it twice in his life, 10 over years of time. In that instant it surged into his heart. In the end, what was left was that stormy night, his benevolent and peaceful smile. He was Ghost Li or Zhang Xiaofan, who would know? And who would care? Pooh! That man was at the door, facing the remains of the Dharmakaya, who was sitting cross-legged on the shimmering jade plate. Just like the young man back then, he knelt down and kowtowed 3 times. Then, he raised his head and looked solemn. There was a deep and endless pain on his face as he said, "Master." Complete silence. teacher, you. Rest in peace. He spoke in a low voice and then stood up, without another word, turned and opened the door, walked out. Pu Hong and Fa Fei, who were highly skilled, for the moment were also stunned speechless, only saw Ghostly walking out of this small house. In the silence, Fa Fei sighed, said, He really has great wisdom, great benevolence and compassion. Really an extraordinary man in the world, Amitba. Pu Hong Master turned around, looked at the Dharmakaya, after a long time, put his palms together and said, Junior brother, you can finally rest in peace. Pu Hong Master's surprised exclamation made Fa Fei also shocked, quickly followed Pu Hong Master's gaze, immediately his body shook, his face full of astonishment. Pu Ji's body sitting cross-legged on the jade ice plate had already undergone a change. In the spots of snow-like silver-white light, Pu Ji's body actually turned into powder like sand and stone. Little by little it turned into dust so fine that it was almost invisible to the naked eye, slowly falling down. For some reason, the original trace of pain on his aged face had disappeared. Instead, he seemed to have revealed a gratified smile. The weathering speed was getting faster and faster, the entire body was about to disappear. Pu Hong Master's eyes were filled with tears, put his palms together and said, Junior brother, your wish has been fulfilled, senior brother is happy for you. From now on the Buddhist sea is boundless, you better take care of yourself. The Dharmakaya swiftly weathered, finally completely turned into white dust, in the middle of the silvery white light emitted by the jade plate, slowly fell down. And at this moment, after the jade plate received the dust, the magical weapon's light abruptly flourished. In the tightly shut small house, there was an inexplicable force blowing wind. Indistinctly, there seemed to be Buddhist chanting, leisurely traveled over. The jade plate's light became brighter and brighter, the wind speed in the small house also became faster and faster. Pu Hong and Fa Fei's monk robes fluttered loudly, both looked at each other in shock. Suddenly, a sharp whistle was heard from the jade plate, the light burst out, countless of dust soaked in the snow-like light, flew out in all directions, a loud rumble immediately erupted. Boom! Dust flew up and was immediately covered by the enormous dazzling light. The walls around the small house were instantly destroyed by the jade plate's strange light, not a single trace was left. The moonlight shone high up, clear like snow, reflecting on this mountain peak, the quiet mortal world. There was actually such a strange scene. The jade plate, in a stretch of light, slowly rose up from where it was. Beside this treasure, the silver-white dust danced, as if it had spirituality, following it. In the courtyard outside the house, Ghostly stood silently, looking up at the sky, his face full of tears. The jade plate flew over by itself, circled around Ghostly's body 3 times, and finally stopped in front of Ghostly. Ghostly stared at the specks of dust, clenched his teeth, almost unable to control himself. Following which, in that almost solidified brilliance, in the bleak and beautiful night scene of heaven and earth, the jade ice dish made a light sound, like breaking ice and snow. The clear sound reverberated. In front of Ghostly, this heaven and earth treasure similarly turned into countless of dust, glittering under the moonlight, like falling snow in profusion, brilliant and dazzling. From afar, the mountain breeze blew over, countless dust floated up with the wind, fluttering in the air, carried by the wind far away, finally gradually disappeared. Chapter 347. Qingyun Hill, Big Bamboo Valley. From the end of the Qingyun battle till now, many days had passed. The battlefield, which had changed drastically, also gradually quietened down, all traces of the battle, quietly erased in the process of people cleaning up. On that day, not knowing how many people lost their friends and loved ones, on Tong Tian Peak, even more piled up corpses, from the peak to the foot, it was like the legendary Hell. Maybe it was because of luck. Big Bamboo Valley, which had the least number of disciples, in this battle, not a single disciple died, but almost everyone was wounded. Even Tian Bui, who was guarding Big Bamboo Valley to activate the Tianji seal, also looked very tired. Among the disciples, second disciple Wu Di, fourth disciple Hidaji both had the heaviest injuries. After these few days they were still bedridden to recuperate, but the silver lining in the misfortune, they did not suffer any serious injuries. After Tianbui personally checked, they only needed to recuperate quietly. In the future, it wouldn't be an obstacle to their cultivation. Just that even though it was so, and they had just narrowly defeated the beast deity in a life-and-death battle and averted the calamity for the common people, the atmosphere in Big Bamboo Valley looked extremely gloomy. The disciples for the past few days could not cheer up, even Tianbui also frowned tightly. This day early in the morning, Tianbui was summoned to Tong Tian Peak by sect head Reverend Daoxian's disciples. After he returned at noon, his round plump face, gloomy, his brows furrowed together, looking like it could not be opened anymore. Around noon, Tianbui ordered all the Big Bamboo Valley disciples to gather at Shoujing Hall, even Wu Di and Hidaji who were bedridden. Tianbui also got someone to support them to the hall, sat them down. The usually deserted observed silence hall. It was a rare occasion that everyone was present. Tianbai's wife Suru also stood beside the seat of honor, looking at her graceful bearing, just that her left hand was still wrapped in a white bandage. Naturally she was also wounded in that battle. Tianbui clasped his hands behind his back, paced up and down the hall a few times, glanced at the disciples who were either sitting or standing in a row, in a deep voice said, "Today I called all of you here, not for anything else, it is still because of that Zhu Xian ancient sword." All the disciples had solemn expressions on their faces, but not many of them were shocked. It was obvious that most of them had already guessed it. Tianbui and Suru looked at each other, then looked at the disciples, said, "This morning sect head Reverend called me over again, and with me, only your small Bamboo Valley Shueihua teacher uncle. As for what she said, all of you can probably guess. The matter of Zhu Xian ancient sword being destroyed, no matter what you must keep it a secret, must not leak out even a little bit of information." The Big Bamboo Valley disciples looked at each other. In the end it was eldest disciple Xavion who coughed and said, "Sure Fu, you also know us, such an important matter, we would rather die than say a word to the public." Speaking till here, he hesitated for a moment, looked at Tianbui, lowered his voice, said, "Master, not to mention you and Shenyang have already reminded us several times, just sect head Reverend and Tong Tian Peak side, including this time, it is already the fourth time such a message came. Could it be that not only do they not believe us, they don't even believe Master and Master's wife?" Tianbui frowned, suddenly shouted loudly, "Insolence! Who are you, actually dare to make presumptuous assumptions about sect head Reverend and the teachers?" Xavion's countenance changed, bowed his head and said, "Yes, disciple knows his mistake." Suru stood at the side, walked over to smooth things over, said, all right, these are all instructions from sect head Reverend, and the matter of Zhu Xian ancient sword being destroyed is too important, no wonder sect head senior brother is so nervous about it, so asking a few more times, explaining a few more times is also right. Tianbui turned his head to one side, did not speak. Xavion and the rest of the disciples all bowed their heads and said, "Disciple understands." Suru looked at the disciples one by one, softly said, "I know the few of you feel rather wronged, feel that sect head Reverend and the teachers cannot believe you. Actually in the end, these are all due to the importance of the matter, we have no choice. After the previous battle, our Qing Yun sect's reputation in the world's good faction was unparalleled, suppressing all the other fellow good faction members. But all of this, to put it bluntly, is because sect head Reverend on Tong Tian Peak, wielding Zhu Xian's celestial sword in his hand in a fierce battle with the beast deity, defeated it. For our Qing Yun sect to have what we have today, the weight of this Zhu Xian's celestial sword, I think all of you are as clear as I am." Suru spoke until here, gave a mournful smile, said, "But we never expected, this celestial sword would actually." She paused, as if to compose herself, before continuing, said, "That day outside the illusory moon cave, Other than sect head reverend and a few elders teacher uncles who rushed over, there were only big Bamboo Valley disciples and a few small Bamboo Valley female disciples, who witnessed the celestial sword being destroyed. So for our sect's reputation and reputation in the world, sect head reverend's side is more considerate, exhorting a few more times is also right. All of you do not take it to heart, just remember to hide this matter forever in your heart, understand? Xavion and the rest looked at each other, said in unison, "Disciples understand, we will obey teacher and teacher's wife's orders." Suru turned to look at Tianbui. Tianbui was frowning, his fat face still very solemn, as if completely not comforted by Suru's words, only stretched out his hand and waved to the disciples, said, "What your teacher's wife said, all of you better remember. All right, go down." Xavion and the rest bowed together, turned and went down together. Wu Dei, Hidaji and the rest who had difficulty moving, were also supported by Xavion, Du Baishu and the rest. Very soon, everyone left, leaving only Tianbui and Suru standing in the observed silence hall. Suru looked at Tianbai's increasingly gloomy face, slowly walked to his side, quietly said, "What is it? Is sect head senior brother throwing a tantrum again?" Tianbui faintly snorted, said, "He is not only throwing a tantrum at me, even Shueiwe, that kind of person, he actually scolded her too. What am I?" Suru was shocked, exclaimed, "What, sect head senior brother, he even scolded Shueiwe senior sister?" A trace of impatience appeared on Tianbai's face, the pace of his pacing obviously quickened, his brows also frowned even tighter. Suru looked at his expression, was rather worried but did not know what to say, could only say, "You also don't need to worry too much, sect head senior brother, he is just too anxious for a moment, so." Tianbui abruptly raised his head, loudly interrupted, "If he is really too anxious, even if he scolds me 1,000 or 10,000 times, I won't care?" Suru lowered her head but quickly raised it again, a shocked expression on her face, asked, "What did you say just now?" Tianbui mumbled incessantly, quickly paced back and forth in the observed silence hall. His expression became more and more restless, and even indistinctly showed a trace of worry. Suru became even more worried, anxiously said, "What exactly do you mean? Quickly say it." Tianbui walked to Suru, stopped, was silent for a moment, in a deep voice said, "These few days, Daoxian senior brother many times summoned me and Shueiwe, repeatedly exhorted the sect disciples to keep the secret. This is understandable. But these few times, I see something is wrong with Daoxian senior brother." Suru was startled, said, "Wrong, what do you mean?" Tianbui frowned, said, "In the past, do you remember Daoxian senior brother scolding people so easily?" Suru was silent, after a long time shook her head, said, "Sect head senior brother is highly skilled. His character is upright. He does not show his emotions, how would he scold people so easily?" Tianbui nodded, said, "That's right, it is so, even you also know this. But after this big battle, Daoxian senior brother's temperament seemed to have changed greatly. He became more and more irritable. These few times he summoned me and Shueiwe, just exhorting a little is enough, but every time he started with a pleasant expression, in the end, for some reason, because of some inexplicable small matters, he would fly into a rage, or scold, or vent his anger, anyway." He shook his head, slowly raised his eyes to look at Suru, hesitated for a moment, walked up to Suru, lowered his voice and said, "I suspect, Daoxian senior brother in the battle with the beast deity. He had already been counterattacked by Zhu Xian's sword spirit, so." Suru's expression changed, anxiously said, "Shut up." After speaking, she quickly walked out of the observed silence hall, glanced left and right, after making sure there was no one, walked back and whispered to Tianbui, "This is our Qin Yun sect's secret, you cannot speak carelessly." Tianbui sighed, said, "This matter is of such great importance, how would I dare to speak carelessly? But in the previous big battle, Daoxian senior brother, in order to win, disregarded my repeated dissuasion, forcefully opened the Tianji seal which sealed Qing Yun's 7 veins of spiritual energy by generations of founders, causing Zhu Xian ancient sword's power to increase greatly. Just that every time I recalled the last words left by the founders, this Zhu Xian ancient sword's vicious energy was too strong, its murderous energy against the heaven, seemed to be an inauspicious object. I cannot treat it lightly. When I returned today, I parted with Shuiwei at Tongtian Peak, although both of us have always been at odds, but when we parted, we seemed to feel something. I guess that Shuiwei must have the same thoughts as me, just that this matter is too important, both of us dare not speak it out. Chapter 348. Suru was silent for a long time, her voice slightly hoarse, said, "Even so, but in the end it is still above Zhu Xian. Now that Zhu Xian has been destroyed, even if sect head senior brother is unfortunate to be harmed, but firstly there is no source, secondly his skills are divine, as long as time passes, most likely he will gradually come to his senses and resolve it himself." Tianbai's solemn expression did not diminish at all, faintly said, "I hope so, if not, with his position as Qing Yun's leader, if anything happens to him, this Qing Yun sect from top to bottom really don't know how to clean up the mess." Suru thought for a moment, then helplessly sighed, dejectedly said, "Forget it, this is also not something we can manage now, you don't have to be too troubled. There is one more thing, I have always wanted to ask, after Zhu Xian's sword was destroyed, how was it dealt with?" Tian Bui pondered for a moment, said, "I have inquired about this matter from a senior brother who is in the know, heard that after Dao Xian's senior brother reprimanded everyone not to leak it out, he immediately picked up the broken Zhu Xian's sword and at the same time walked into the illusory moon cave, not allowing anyone to enter the illusory moon cave forbidden grounds. So until today, no one knew what happened to that Zhu Xian ancient sword? Maybe there is still hope to repair it?" Tian Bui said the last sentence to himself, but then shook his head with a bitter smile. Obviously even he himself did not believe such a thing. After a few bitter laughs he casually said, "We can't care about that sword, but today when we went to Tongtian Peak, other than suffering an inexplicable scolding, we also heard of a strange matter." Suru was surprised, said, "What strange matter?" Tian Bui shrugged his shoulders, said, "You won't believe it even if I say it, in the previous battle, how many disciples and elders died, and now at Tongtian Peak's Crystal Hall public memorial. But that Dao Xian senior brother of ours only showed his face once a day and then disappeared. Instead he went to the back mountain to keep vigil for people at Founder's Ancestral Hall every day. Don't you think it strange?" Suru was stunned, said in surprise, "Keep vigil? What happened at Founder's Ancestral Hall? Don't tell me a senior elder has passed away?" Tian Bui shook his head, sneered and said, "What elder? I heard a few disciples secretly discussing. Actually it was an old man who had been guarding and cleaning the Founder's Ancestral Hall for decades. For some reason he happened to die that day. How he died, nobody knows, only know that after Dao Xian's senior brother knew about it, he was dumbstruck for a while and then flew into a rage, heard that he was in a daze for a few days. In the end he insisted on placing this old man's memorial tablet into the Founder's Ancestral Hall, but the strangest thing was, the memorial tablet that he placed in the Founder's Ancestral Hall was actually blank. The more Suru listened, the more confused she became. She was even more shocked in her heart. She shook her head and said, what exactly is going on? Could it be that sect head Shixiang is really a little muddled?" Tian Bili sneered, said, "No one knows whether he is muddle-headed or not. Anyway, someone advised him, but he refused to listen. And he did not take a good look at the memorial tablets of the disciples in the Crystal Hall. Instead he went to the Founder's Ancestral Hall to stare at the empty memorial tablet in a daze. If this goes on, I think this Qing Yun sect, sooner or later something will happen, sooner or later it will be destroyed in his hands." Suru was silent, after a long while, faintly sighed, looked out of the observed silence hall, saw that in this lonely afternoon, the outside was also empty, only the blue sky in the distance. The mountain breeze blew past, indistinctly heard the rustling of the bamboos at the back of the mountain, but for some reason, it instead added a sense of loneliness. Qing Yun Hill, Tong Tian Peak, Founder's Ancestral Hall at the back of the mountain. This place was as quiet and solemn as usual. The tall ancestral hall still stood tall, the surrounding woods as green as before, as if the earth-shattering battle that happened on Qing Yun Hill a few days ago did not affect this place at all. Other than one less cleaning elder, and on that dim altar, in an inconspicuous place among the countless memorial tablets, there was an additional unfamiliar and blank memorial tablet. Lin Jingyu silently knelt before that empty memorial tablet, dressed in mourning clothes, a brazier placed in front of him, 2 white candles on the table, 3 thin incense sticks, light smoke curling up, gently floated up and soon blended into the other offerings, never to be separated again. Lin Jingyu looked sorrowful, his lips tightly pursed, woodenly kneeling on the ground, slowly threw the stack of paper money in his hands into the burning tongues of flame in the brazier, watching them gradually curl and turn yellow, gradually turning into ashes, and then slowly threw in new paper money. In between, he looked up at that empty memorial tablet from time to time. To place this elder's memorial tablet in the founder's ancestral hall, it was Qing Yun's sect head Reverend Daoxian alone. The other elders did not agree. Just that Qing Yun's sect head had always held great authority. In addition, after Reverend Daoxian defeated the beast deity, his reputation became even more unparalleled. Everyone saw that he insisted and could only follow him. Just that, although this matter was out of Lin Jingyu's expectations, but what happened next made him even more surprised. Reverend Daoxian actually placed an empty memorial tablet in the founder's ancestral hall. For this, Lin Jingyu even boldly asked Reverend Daoxian, who came to pay his respects. Unexpectedly, Reverend Daoxian only indifferently retorted with a question, and Lin Jingyu was rendered speechless. Then, do you know his name? Lin Jingyu was dumbstruck. Although he had followed this mysterious elder for 10 years, but regarding this elder's own past, this elder had never revealed anything to him. Right now, to make Lin Jingyu say anything, he was really at his wit's end. Just that, looking at Reverend Daoxian's expression, it was obvious that he more or less knew something about this elder, but he had no intention of revealing it. Although Lin Jingyu was puzzled, but in the end he did not dare to be too presumptuous in front of Reverend Daoxian, and could only silently retreat. Anyway, in his heart, although this elder's memorial tablet was empty, but his voice and smile were clearly engraved in his heart, and had never faded. The public memorial ceremony at the front mountain. He had also paid his respects before, just that he always felt that there were innumerable disciples paying their respects there. But this elder, although he possessed exceptional skills, yet quietly left the mortal world, no matter what he had to send him off, and Reverend Daoxian seemed to have tacitly allowed him to come here, to help this elder clear up his funeral affairs. And he, as the sect head, disregarding the shocked gazes of the many disciples, frequently came to this founder's ancestral hall to visit this elder's empty memorial tablet, which caused many conjectures. But Lin Jingyu could not be bothered about it. Right now, footsteps were heard behind him. For the past few days, Lin Jingyu was already familiar with the footsteps. Once he heard it, he knew it was Reverend Daoxian. He stood up and turned back, quietly said, "Sect head." Reverend Daoxian unhurriedly walked into the founder's ancestral hall. The hall was dimly lit, although Lin Jingyu had been staying here, but for the moment he could not see Daoxian's face clearly. He could only vaguely see Daoxian's figure, standing in the shadows, silently looking at the empty memorial tablet beside him. For some reason, Lin Jingyu looked at that indistinct figure in the darkness, suddenly felt something was not right, but what exactly was wrong, he could not pinpoint it, only felt an inexplicable palpitation, indistinctly nervous. Is he still well? Reverend Daoxian finally spoke. His voice seemed rather deep, hoarse, and also seemed to be exerting force, suppressing something, very different from his usual tone. Lin Jingyu was even more puzzled but still replied, "Disciple kept vigil for elder day and night, burned incense punctually, never neglected." That figure in the shadows moved, unhurriedly said, "He has you to send him off so wholeheartedly. His 10 years of teaching you was not in vain." Heh. His laughter was cold. In this dimly lit founder's ancestral hall, there was some eeriness. "Don't know if I die, then." He suddenly stopped, seemed to feel that he had said something wrong. Lin Jingyu naturally did not dare to speak, stood there with his hands at his side. The founder's ancestral hall fell into silence. After a moment, Reverend Daoxian said, "You go out for a while, I have some words to speak to him alone." Lin Jingyu was surprised, acknowledged, said, "Yes." Speaking, he strode out. Once out of the founder's ancestral hall, standing on the open space under the sunlight, Lin Jingyu immediately felt his spirits lifted. He then realized, in that hall, he seemed to have a repressed feeling. He walked one round around the hall, waited for almost an hour but still did not see Reverend Daoxian coming out. While he was puzzled, turned back and happened to see a back figure disappearing on the small path leading to the illusory moon cave. Ever since the battle ended, the illusory moon cave once again became a restricted area. The one who could enter, naturally, was only Reverend Daoxian alone. Lin Jingyu glanced around, shook his head, turned and walked back into the founder's ancestral hall. He walked to the front of the empty memorial tablet and saw that in front of the memorial tablet 3 thin incense sticks had been inserted again, and there seemed to be a lot more ashes in the brazier in front of it, as if someone had burned some paper money here. Lin Jingyu pondered for a moment, slowly raised his head. That empty tablet was still quietly standing in that secluded corner, silent. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Nights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.